Serious? What deal breaker did you not know about your so until after you started living together? She couldn't say sorry. Dated for years and she could never admit she made a mistake. Like one time she got something out of my car at night and somehow left the passenger door open. It rained and the passenger seat got soaked. Car smelled like mildew after that for as long as I owned it. I was really upset when it happened because the car was literally a week old. But the best she could do was make a joke about how a deer must have broken into my car and then not talk to me for a whole day. My ex was the same way. Her apologies were always "I'm sorry you feel that way. That is not the same as I'm sorry I did this you butthole." He doesn't mind dirt. I'm not obsessed with a spotless house. But poo on the toilet bowl? Dust so thick you can't read the buttons on the TV? He was fine with that. He couldn't stand a single messy pile of clutter but didn't care much about filth. It was so odd for me. His house was always spotless when I came to visit. When we moved in together I realized he only bothered with that if someone he wasn't comfortable with was coming over. I knew it was probably bad when I picked up one of his 2 pairs of work pants and made a comment about how I was washing them because they were rather rank. To which he replied, "Oh, that's because I haven't washed them since I bought them." He gets uniform allowance in July. It was December. I've done that occasionally with jeans, but the longest I've gone is probably a month and they were trashy anyways so I didn't really care. A female friend of mine moved in with a guy who seemed totally normal. Then a large delivery of adult-sized nappies diapers arrived. She stuck with it. Then he insisted on wearing them, and she stuck with it. He insisted on peeing them and getting her to change it. Dear readers, she stuck with it. She had a hip operation and couldn't get upstairs quickly enough to meet his demands and the whole thing fell down. What some people will put up with. I kinda knew it beforehand, as he needed time to himself all the time and we only saw each other on weekends. But only after we moved in together I realized how much time he really needed to himself. I basically never saw him and it felt more like we were roommates. I get how you need alone time and time to unwind after work. I mean, so do I. But never really seeing your partner wasn't the kind of relationship I wanted. I'm worried this sounds like me, lol. I usually see my boyfriend 1.5 days a week and we don't really talk between then, but I love it because I'm trying to work on being more independent. We dated for a year before moving in together, but I didn't know just how weird this guy was until I was with him 24/7. He was always doing really strange things, rearranging furniture while I was out, moving my stuff and not telling me where he put it, peeing beer bottles and leaving them by the TV. One time he used foam sealants to seal the front door shut and we could only use the back door until we finally got it back open. He never made an effort to get to know my family and lied about his own father dying. I eventually was like, okay, I'm out and moved back home, and the next day he totaled the car that was in my name and immediately went out and bought a new one. When I was living with him he said he was broke and living off of credit cards, but he had apparently had a stash of money he didn't want to tell me about. Weird dude. That he was a totally self-absorbed CEO, and that he peed in bottles when B was too lazy to go pee and then left them around the bedroom. Freaking heinous. Oh god. The reason pee doesn't stink too and is BC it's mixed with all that water in the toilet. The smell must have been freaking awful. He used to be into drugs. No big deal. I can't smoke because of my job, but it's not my place to judge if someone else does. He conveniently left out the part where he lost custody of his kids, less than a week before we started dating, for smoking crack. Like, crack. I'm not just calling him a sickhead as a euphemism. His penchants for throwing tuna cans when angry. Had to pay for the dent he left in the metal closet door when our lease was up. Was happy to pay, though, because that can miss my head by millimeters. He lied about everything. We started out long distance as pen pals, mid-90s before everyone was online. After a lot of phone calls, letters, etc. we finally met IRL when he came to visit me. First lie, he looked nothing like he described. Fine, I can forgive that. We ended up getting our own place and he just kept piling up lies. He talked me into going out to see where his family was from. Here are some things he lied about. His real name, his brother being a half-brother, his past relationships, his family's living conditions, And he got away with all this lying because English was his family's second language and they never spoke it at home. I was always in the dark. Even if one of them wanted to say something to me, they'd say it to him and he'd tell me. They could all speak English, but they wouldn't talk to me. It was a hard lesson, but luckily I learned it as a teenager and it taught me a lot about what red flags to watch out for. I didn't know he was moving in. He was a friend's roommate when we met, but one night he came over and just didn't leave. I asked my friend about it and they had kicked him out for being an alcoholic, screaming at like 2 AM and urinating in the neighbor's yard. When he came back from work, I had his bag packed and told him to gtfo. Good on you. Sounds like you dodged a bullet. We dated off and on for 5 months. We spent most of the time out. Home time was Netflix TV series we both liked. Great times and thought I found the one. Once she moved in, it was 14 hours a day of political news and opinion shows which would leak into every conversation we had about any subject. The entire DVR was filled within 2 weeks with the CNN and MSNBC 6 hours of evening politics shows. Delete one to make room for something and she knew within a few hours. It was creepy obsessive. She kept a notebook with TV schedules of those shows, with tightly planned viewing times and recordings to maximize being able to watch and record it all. There was no hint of this when I asked her to move in. We agreed on most political issues but it's not something I want to discuss often. So glad when she moved out. It was so frustrating to have to cringe every time you speak a sentence because you know her next words are, "I know you don't like politics but..." She was a crappy, abusive alcoholic. And when I say crappy, I literally mean she was one of those people who would get so drunk she'd start peeing crapping on things, especially if they're your things that she knows are pretty dear to you. This was over 10 years ago, but fucked upness of that whole situation still grinds my butt every so often to this day. I was with this person locked into a lease with this freaking garbage dump of a human during my last year at uni. So, yeah. He has no motivation. He quit his job, only does his assignments half-assed in the day they're due, never puts away clothes, does dishes, cleans. Like literally he does nothing, and has no motivation to change the fact that he does nothing, but then blames me when we have dishes piling up, crumbs all over the floor and no clothes in the dresser and money is tight. I've know a lot of people like that. How some people keep up with it is beyond me. Children. My ex really wanted children. Like, his sole purpose in life was to be a dad. 18-year-old me didn't want kids. After 3 years of my ego not getting preggo, he cheated and got what he wanted. She would go on dumb fad diets. One was a Atkins-esque diet, but she would only eat 2 different meals. One was scrambled eggs and chorizo, the other was canned tuna and yellow mustard. When she would make the tuna and mustard she would slop it around in the bowl for like 20 minutes mixing it. ASMR nightmare. Worst sounds in the world, and the smell was freaking awful. Lord have mercy. She was severely bipolar. Not only this, but she had lied about several family members and the lives they led, including claiming her father had terminal cancer, which in reflection makes me believe she was a pathological liar. Before you ask how on earth we got so far without me knowing these things, we moved in pretty quick after she told me she had a lot of trouble at home with abuse, which I also believe could have been a lie or at the minimum exaggerated heavily. The number of lies this girl told has severely impacted me now and I very much struggle to date because of it. He's weird about cups. He must always know where all the cups are and if there are any missing he wants to know where and why. He had no idea how to take care of himself or function as an adult at all. He lived with his rich parents before we moved in together, and his bedroom was always spotless because the maid would clean it for him, on his own. He was a slovenly human being with no basic life skills. He threw candy wrappers and garbage directly onto the floor, refused to clean the bathrooms at all, and hid dirty dishes under the bed. He flooded the apartment repeatedly by putting dish soap in the dishwasher or cramming the washing machine absurdly full in an effort to wash everything he owned in one load. It was our own washer. He wasn't doing this to save quarters. It was just pure laziness. When he cooked, he would put his portion of scrambled eggs or whatever he was making onto a plate, and leave the rest of the food in the pan on high until it set off the smoke alarm. Despite living like a small, human-sized hurricane, He was used to a spotless house and disliked mess. I would leave for work in the morning, he didn't work. Mommy and daddy were paying his half of the bills so he had time to find himself. And when I came home in the evening, the apartment would be a disaster and he would be loudly complaining that the place was messy and no one had cleaned it. What he really wants in life isn't a girlfriend, it's a live-in maid who pays all his bills and has sex with him. Good luck with that. He's like, militant atheist, not normal atheist. Will yell God's not real at people atheist. Fortunately he admits it's probably not okay and should get help. Former militant. Hopefully he grows out of it. And I agree, it can be insufferable. She would blow her nose constantly, that's fine. But she would throw the tissues on the floor, the bed, the table where we eat. While dating she made the effort to put them in the garbage immediately. I have a microbiology degree, so this extra wigged me out. It drove me mad. But then she began looking up scenarios to murder her ex-husband. Apparently the fact that I looked up a lesbian video on Pornhub was a bigger deal. Yep, that escalation lol. She's a hoarder. So am I. Not in an animal crap on the floor kind of way but in the way we both keep everything. I wanted our spare room to be my library, have over 600 books, but it is just filled with stuff. Totally unusable. An entire, good sized room with a window seat. I don't even know all what is in there. Stuff we do not need. Every closet is packed. We're working on it together. I'm wishing you the best of luck. That can be really hard to deal with, even when it's your own hoarding. Good on both of you for recognizing the problem and working toward fixing it. Many people are afraid of their hoarding and prefer not to think about it rather than working to change themselves. For many mental stresses, addressing the problem might be one of the hardest steps in my opinion. She was a prostitute. I don't remember the site name but it was similar to Craigslist and she put pictures up. At first I didn't believe it because her cousin, who we didn't get along with, sent me screenshots and I thought he just made the post. Or I should say she convinced me he made the post. Then one day I snooped through her phone and found text messages of some guy asking if she had a pimp because he can really help her out. And she had responded she's doing fine on her own. He voluntarily chose to stay unemployed. I once had a really long day at work and walked in the door to have him nag me about where I'd left my handbag. Near the door but out of the way. I said I'd been up since 5. Commuted 4 hours total and worked a 10-hour day and could I please sit for a minute, catch my breath and I'd put the bag away. He replied with I've not been home all day cleaning for you to mess it up. So get to it and put that bag away. He stood over me until I did it. Yeah, no, I couldn't live with this and the many other controlling and manipulative ways of his. Dated a dude and moved in with him. He turned out to be an asexual, XH addict, in the closet furry. Still stayed with him for over a year. Certainly one of the lowest points in my life. So he kept the costume in the closet and only wore it in there. She couldn't handle any degree of confrontation. I'm not one for non-stop arguing, but if an argument needs to take place, then an argument needs to take place. I think it was to do with her upbringing and having a crappy dad, but anytime there was a degree of frustration building on my part, it just made her spiral shut down, with the occasional panic attack. I tried my best to accommodate her, and, ultimately, as frustrating as it was not a deal breaker for me. Unfortunately, it was for her. We tried couples therapy a year earlier and it had done absolute wonders for us. And I suggested we tried it again, but her mind was made up. She needed to go. She'd swept all of her issues under the rug and essentially created her very own pressure cooker. I feel bad for her, because she seems of the genuine belief that there are healthy relationships out there that function with zero confrontation. And I feel as though she's just going to keep repeating this cycle until she can come to the understanding that there are some changes she also needs to work on within herself. Unlike her, I come from a household where, to this day, my parents still love each other very much, and I have observed them navigate the ups and downs of what a 30+ year marriage entails. All I wanted was the same with her. I miss her every day. ETA, whoa, did not think this would explode. I realize that the way I phrased this made it sound like I did the 180 and had all these expectations put on him. Not the case. I just didn't want to go into crazy detail about the relationship itself. Wasn't the point. The man was great overall. I continued to do stuff for him after we moved in together, but his initiative that was present before we moved in totally dissolved. The idea that I was treating him like a king and allowed him to be a slob is false. I treated him like a king because he contributed to the relationship equally, which I didn't think to mention. But regardless of what he did or not at the start didn't change the fact that his cohabitation fantasy was just that. I like doting on people I date, so when we started dating I was known to cook and clean after him, etc. But even though we may as well have been living together at that point, it was fun for me to always be on top of things and I really liked doing it. Just didn't expect him to remain that way when I officially moved in with him. I felt more like his mom at that point, and I probably would have continued to suffer in silence until I realized he was still talking to his ex and old hookups. That relationship unraveled pretty quickly afterwards. I had a similar experience. My ex made more money than I did, so he paid more of the bills and I did most of the housework. I was hospitalized for 2 weeks. When I was released I came home to a hyper, unwalked dog, loads of pizza boxes, and our combined laundry I had left before being admitted. Being physically drained from medical work and doing days worth of dishes is not a good combo. Dated a man twice my age when I was 17/18. At some point my mother kicked me out of the house. I was a freaking mess at this age. I don't blame her, so I had no option but to go live with him. Before he came to pick me up to start our lives together, he came clean about his real name, the fact that he's still married, in the process of divorcing, and has 7 kids, oldest a year younger than me. Never married but started dating for a few weeks. Then one day she just casually pulls out a 1/5 of vodka from her purse and starts drinking it from the bottle. I thought nothing of it at the time, but then it was like she was trying to get me to accept her alcoholism by slowly introducing me to it. But the deal breaker was I told her that it was me or the booze. At this point she would be S-faced all hours of the day. So she stays clean for a week and I was ecstatic, but then it was Thanksgiving and she was late to my mom's house and she calls me and I'm expecting her to explain what the holdup was, but no. It was her drunk calling me. I told her not to bother coming over cause we are done. She died in 2013 and from what I hear she odd on pills. Ultimatums usually mean death for a relationship. That I was getting married to a physically aggressive crazy who equated her being physically violent on me to my being passive aggressive with her. After you've assaulted and humiliated me, I just want some space to be let alone. Eventually called the cops on her, and she's out of my life forever. Smoking in the apartment at least 3 times a day. It's never something I had thought about before we had lived together because I'm not against pot. But when I lived with someone who refused to smoke outside and smoked 3+ times a day in the apartment, it drove me crazy. She had no depth, like she was a completely surface level person who blocked off the bad and just replaced it with extrovert behavior. We were together 3 years, had a kid, and I never learned the stuff about her unless she was drunk as frick and or pee. She produces an insane amount of body heat, like legitimately unreal. The AC is set to 72. It's a tiny 1-bedroom apartment, no blankets, and after falling asleep I subconsciously roll away to preserve my life. I wake up every 2 hours and I'm completely drenched in sweat. She is too. Long story short, I rearranged my entire bedroom so that my bed is directly in front of the AC vent. Now I sleep in peace, and she uses every blanket in the apartment. That she needed constant affirmation that I loved her, else she would think I hated her. Here was the final straw. We're laying in bed. I'm trying to sleep. She just starts poking me. I said, babe, I need to get to sleep, I have class at 8. A few minutes later she poked me again, giggling. So I looked over and jokingly went, don't make me go sleep on the couch, to which she goes, you wouldn't. So I smirked and said, watch me. After about 5 minutes, I came back, when we made up, and went back to bed. 10-20 minutes passes and cue up the poking again. I just said, oh, so we're still playing this game, and went back to the couch. My plan was to go back in another few minutes. Well, oopsie poopsie, I fell asleep. I woke up an hour or so later and went back to the bedroom to find her missing. After saying her name and looking around, I was stumped. Then I notice a light flickering under the closet door, where I found her with a candle crying. I guess when I fell asleep on the couch, she thought I was mad. So I calmed her down, told her it was an accident, and we went to bed. Cue 30 more minutes and she just blurts out, "Why do you hate me?" Which baffles the frick out of me. I had just spent all weekend building her a fence. I changed her oil in her car and did plugs, belts, filters. And that evening I had cooked her a really nice meal. The entirety of the past few days was characterized by me doing something for her every waking moment. And then she had the gall to ask me why I hated her. Because obviously all of those things I did for her with a smile on my face and love in my heart didn't happen. After the immediately following fight, I realized she was deeply emotionally clingy. She was never a clingy person, but she needed her emotions to be coddled in a way I wasn't capable of doing. For God's sake, I was still basically a child with my own issues. Lucky me, my dorm was all paid for. All I had to do was pack my crap and leave. His dad ingrained in him the old style Mexican take on machismo, and that a man only provides financially while the woman does everything else. That took a while to fix. I have some unresolved issues with an ex. She lives in the house we bought together. It is taking a long time to resolve, partly because I'll let it go a bit, since I was the one that walked out after she became an alcoholic, mentally abusive, and I started getting so depressed I would literally stay longer at work just not to be around her, and while not actually contemplating suicide, at least was feeling that if a car hit me now that wouldn't be bad feeling. New girlfriend is passionate, smart, pretty and fun person. She moves in with me because she spent 90% of her time at my house anyway, and a friend of hers came over to our city who was looking for a place to stay for a few months. We agreed she could stay in GF's apartment and GF would move in with me for a few months and we'd see what would happen. GF is very protective of me and hates what ex-GF did to me. Sometimes she'll go on a rant about her, especially when she feels I'm not moving fast enough with the house. Fine. But what's not fine is that she knows my ex-GF is black, and her rants about my ex aren't that B, they are that black B. If we have a fight she'll tell me to go back to my ex, or to a female friend, who happens to also be black, because I like black chicks. She said she felt sick to know that I had oral sex with that black B. Yeah, not cool. The fact that she also doesn't really like that I'm B, something I told her right away when we started dating, which means I don't feel like I can talk about anything regarding that, and has made some "that's so gay" remarks. I'm breaking it off soon. Typing this out makes it even clearer that I should do this soon. Why the frick am I dating a racist homophobe? Yeah, for your own sake, please get a move on that, and also good luck. What made you break up with the person you thought you'd marry? 1. I lost my father and get ignored me for a week. BC I went out with my friends to distract myself. 2. Told me he'd shoot his face off if I was ever happy with anyone but him. Went back with him to visit his family in the UK for a month. I'm Chinese, he's Scottish, and found that he's an extremely selfish, self-centered spoiled brat, and his family thinks he is an angel and expected me to bow to him as they all did. Worst of all, he was never this way when we were dating here in my country where he's an expat, but his true colors shone when he was back with his family. Sorry for what happened, but at least you dodged a serious bullet. That kind of ego would be heck on you. A good way to analyze who someone is by seeing how they act with the people they're most comfortable with, and you definitely saw that with them being around their family. He's an absolutely wonderful dude. He just thought I was a different person than I really am. He and I met during a very stressful point of my life, and he thought that if I quit doing all the things that made me me, like volunteering, being a workaholic, helping my family, I'd be perfect. In the end, when the crazy subsided, I landed a job that makes me the happiest ever, via the volunteering I was doing, and my family stabilized and isn't quite as crazy as before. We're both married to other people now, and thanks to social media I can see that he chose well, and is super happy. I'm happy here, and honestly, I'm really grateful for the way it all worked out. Nothing wrong at all with him, and he deserves all the goodness in life he has. You're a good person. We figured out that while we love each other, we don't like each other as often as we used to. We were becoming less and less close physically and emotionally, and even getting lost in our travel adventures could only keep us together for so long. Oddly, She could be one of those sweetest, most thoughtful people you'll ever meet, but could flip a switch at the silliest times. Real mind frick. Breaking it off after 6 years was one of the most adult and most painful things I've ever done in my life. I made 5 women cry that day. Her, our moms and my sisters. I also cried like a girl. I half joke that I may end up just dying alone to avoid a mess like that again, lol. This made me really sad. Blackout drinking and raging. Hangovers. Fights. Walking on eggshells all the time. Lack of emotional, financial security. Immaturity. I couldn't leave easily because she knew about something illegal that could get me in trouble, and she was capable of drunkenly posting it on Facebook or letting the cops know, even though she profited from it too. Our sex started to die off in the bedroom and she started to lock her phone and message late at nights, with smiles that I never got anymore. After a long trip alone to her hometown to see her parents and friends, alone by herself, we were drinking late with other friends, and afterwards she drunkenly broke down and confessed that she slept with someone. In my mind I was like, frick yes. Score B fricked up, lost the moral high ground, and all I had to do was stay the course and act hurt. Still helped her to settle her matters, etc. She went on to continue drinking hard and fricked up her life. After 2 years I came to admit that I'm fricked up also, and also an alcoholic, and quit drinking. Through our stop drinking and AA. Her dog is with me and I love her to bits. My girlfriend and I have a rule about eggshells. If we ever get the feeling we're walking on them, it is our immediate job to smash them and talk about whatever it is, even if we don't know how to verbalize it yet. We both had relationships where eggshell dancing was the norm and decided it's some balls. She slept with my roommate and my other roommate and friends walked in on them mid-doggy. Rip my inbox. I'll answer what I can. She cheated on me multiple times on her trip to Europe, which she is still on. I saw the Facebook messages on the computer where she was still logged in. Then she lied when I called her on it. This all happened about 4 hours ago. I'm at a bit of a loss. I was planning our engagement. I'm glad it happened now, I guess. Very rough though. Hang in there, buddy. It will get better. It got to a point where he wasn't working or going to school and just totally lacked ambition. After all the support and trying to push him to do more, I was done. This is my old roommate's story. We'll call him Mark. On my phone. Excuse the errors. We were renting a house at the time. 3 dudes. We all had day jobs and we would cook dinners most nights. Pretty great roomy situation. Everyone was chill and any issues were resolved quickly between us. Mark starts dating this girl. He was pretty proud of himself. For good reason. She was a solid 10. Seemed like a great girl. She would often come over in the middle of the day and clean our place. Do all of our laundry. Buy groceries. Just because. It was awesome. She worked as well. Just had flexible hours. Home care or something. So one day Mark proposes to her. With this big fat diamond ring. Everyone is happy. We have a big party. In the months planning their wedding she starts eating. Like, a lot. She goes from 120 pounds to probably close to 200 in about 6 months time. Not really a huge issue for Mark. He loves her. But then she starts acting kinda crazy. I am fairly confident she has developed a cocaine problem at this point. We get a series of traffic tickets in her name. She was basically living there at this point, including a fantastic pic of her running a red light while stuffing a huge hoagie into her face. One day I came home early and she scurried out of the house as I was coming in. We later discovered she had taken our other roommate's baseball card collection he had been gathering his entire life. She sold them to some sketchy pawn shop. She was no longer allowed in the house. She pawned her engagement ring and that was the last straw. Mark broke off the engagement. And that night she got good and cracked out, came to the house around midnight, kicked the front door in, and she pulled a Jack Nicholson from The Shining on his bedroom door. Once she made it and she beat the crap out of him. So what was to be a nice happy wedding turned into a huge headache and a restraining order. To this day it is the prime example I use when explaining how a person can pull a complete 180 personality wise. We weren't engaged or anything, but I thought he would be the one I would be with till the very end. But then my dad died and he not once asked if I were okay or offered any kind of support. That's when I realized that we just don't have the same values where it matters, so I broke up with him. We have remained really good friends though and still hang out sometimes. We started dating in high school and had the typical first love relationship. We moved to another state for college and he just completely changed. Well, I guess we both did in our own ways. I was bored in the relationship and he had no ambition whatsoever, unless it was just one of his music projects. He got kicked out of school twice and held a job only like a month the whole time I was in school. I was the only income for us until graduation. I worked 2 jobs during school on top of my clinical rotations. He always needed some new piece of equipment. In my head I didn't realize I could leave the relationship. I finally had enough when I had a death in the family and decided I would go alone so he could take care of trying to get in school for the 3rd time. He made it all about him, that he knew my family didn't like him and was demanding to know why they don't want him there. Not once asked how I was doing either. He bugged me the whole time I was trying to take care of my family too. My sister was talking to me about how she was deciding to leave her husband when it clicked. I didn't have to stay with him even though we were engaged. When I returned home, I told him I would still help him get in school, but only as a friend. I wasn't a priority and he couldn't decide if he wanted to commit. If after 4 years you don't know what you want, then I think it's pretty clear. I'm currently going through this now. It's heartbreaking when I'm ready to give him my all. As we grew, his charm dissipated. When I was 18/19, he didn't have a job so we could always be together. He was messy, but so was I. He played video games day but it was fun. At 27, I was working full-time and getting my BA. He was still jobless. I worked my butt off. He played video games. I cleaned the house. He didn't clean crap. I grew up. He didn't. That's so freaking important. We don't have to remove ourselves from our hobbies, but we have to grow up. OHH super easy answer. Dude was a douche and hit me across the face. Also couldn't hold down a job, but you know, mostly the face thing. I didn't want any kids and I wanted to be allowed to work. He wanted a housewife and a large family. I was willing to settle on a compromise. 2 kids and I still got to work. He left me for it because I wouldn't be exactly what he wanted. He married someone else later who did exactly what he wanted and he was miserable with her and was attempting to take a mutual friend as his mistress. I dodged a bullet. Never compromise on kids. Creating people is not something you want to regret. After being together 6 years, we're engaged, and then we had a child. He suddenly became jealous that he wasn't the center of attention anymore. He didn't even bring me and the baby home from the hospital when I was sick and had to hold a crying baby and puking because he was out with friends and didn't want to help me. That was the last straw. I left with my child and never looked back. He continues to live a pathetic life 15+ years later. I've been engaged twice. First one ended after meeting my family for the first time. My fiance made fun of my brother, who is very intelligent but sometimes socially awkward, for half the ride home. I slept on it, then gave the ring back the next day. Frick that guy. The second engagement. We dated for 3 years and got engaged after 2. The closer it got, the more he decided he wanted to have children immediately, wanted me to stay home with them, and then said, knowing that, I'm wondering if it's worth it for you to continue grad school. I was just starting my 2nd year of my master's program. Bye bye. As someone else who is socially awkward, thank you for sticking up for your brother. Our relationship was 90/10. I would do everything. Take care of everything. Pay for everything. Always be the first one to message, or call or suggest plans. She put hardly any effort into us at all and I know I deserve more than that. I asked her to marry me and she said no. It's been 7 months since then and now she's trying to get back with me saying she's made a mistake. Said I was the only voice of reason in her life and she feels so lost without me. I don't even know how to feel about that. I don't want to be anyone's savior. I used to be with someone whom I dreamed of one day be my better half. I planned ahead, thinking that she's the one, even though she's a negative thinker and so jealous on every woman I knew. I kept on telling myself it's normal because she loves me. There's also some instances that she's accusing me of cheating whenever I cannot reply to her messages instantly. The final straw was when she cheated on me. This is not the first time it happened but the fourth time. Yeah, I know. I'm such a dumbass. The first one was after I went abroad to work. In just 2 weeks, she got into a relationship in which she admitted. The other two is, she was talking to another guy behind my back. That's why you cheaters should delete your conversation. And the last one was she had sex with another guy. There are things men can forgive, but having to another guy while still in a relationship is one of the worst thing you can do to your partner. She begged for forgiveness and asked me to take her back, in which I declined. I love her but I need to love myself more. Years forward, she is in a relationship and messaged me to ask for forgiveness. To me and my family, my mom really loves her, in which I forgave her. I stopped talking to her when she keeps on justifying her actions as to why she cheated on me. I won't let her negativity in my life anymore. We had an intense attraction to each other, but there were 2 reasons I had to walk away. First is he was very jealous and controlling. I couldn't say hi to someone in passing without getting grilled about who he was, how I knew him, was I talking to him secretly, did I wish I was dating him, etc. Second, our ambitions didn't match up. I wanted more out of life than he did. I wanted the professional degree and he wanted to work on cars. There is nothing wrong with that at all, but our paths to our preferred destinations took us in very different directions. I still think of him and wonder, but have been happily married for more than 25 years. She became very dependent on me. She didn't have many friends, nor any opportunities to go out and make any. She didn't have drive to do anything, rather just sit at home and do nothing. No motivation to play any sports or get a job. This sabotaged my life, as I'd always be spending time and money on her because she couldn't afford anything herself. She ended being an emotional toll as she had mental issues, and I thought leaving her would just make it worse. But I'm so glad I left. It lifted a weight off my shoulders and allowed me to achieve a lot more than I was when I was with her. I was in nursing school at the time he and I got together. I was in a transitionary period in my life where my career wasn't set, so I rationalized that it was okay that he worked a minimum wage job at 30 years old. After all, I wasn't sure where my life was headed either. A few years into our relationship, and we talked about marriage a lot. He was still working a low wage, dead-end job, but his 6th such job in 2 years, with no clear plan at all. Any such attempt to lead him into a well-paying job was always met with negativity and dismissal. He could work overtime, though, at his pizza job. He told me that he was going to save up money to buy me a ring. Instead, he bought a $2,000 mountain bike that sat in our garage. He never worked out or enjoyed active things, so it was a purchase that didn't make sense. He never saved for my ring but still talked about marrying me. I hated going into my garage after that. Fast forward a year later, and I'm a nurse. He is working a new minimum wage job, his 8th in 3 years, and spending all of my money on things like gun parts, a clunker of a car he was going to fix up, and a ton of other hobby items that he never used and eventually sold for half its value. It came down to the fact that I knew I'd have to support him and any kids we might have, which would be no easy featuring with his reckless spending habits that put us in the red every month. It also didn't help that he refused to do household chores, and spent his free time playing video games while I hiked, kayaked and went out to social gatherings that he refused to go to. We grew apart. I know my career growth had a lot to do with it, and I think that maybe I was too distracted during school to really see that we weren't right for each other. A month after we looked at rings together, with these tiny shards of diamonds he got from his father that he wanted to incorporate into a ring but were too small and old, I decided we were better as friends and called it quits. I still feel terrible about it because we had so much fun together. We simply weren't compatible enough to go long term. I think the final nail in the coffin was when he told me he wasn't sure he wanted to have kids anymore, and he knew that was a deal breaker for me, who desperately wants them. We broke up 3 years ago. He now has a baby girl and seems happy. I'm dating an amazing man I hope prioritizes me over a mountain bike. I can relate to some of the things in your post. I just wanted to say I am glad you found a partner that has similar priorities. My ex and I met in our early 20s working at a restaurant. Over the next decade I got a doctorate and he stayed in similar job. I also no longer care for partying like I am 20. We grew apart too. She fricked 3 dudes her very first semester away at college. Call me naive for thinking I'd marry my high school sweetheart, but at 20 I believed it. Different priorities and my one-sided hope. I was in early 30s and he was in mid-20s. Been friends for years. Dated for half a year. Met his friends and families. I had high hope we would get closer and get married. He still wanted to enjoy life. I wanted to settle down. Our family opposed. And that's it. The end of our friendship as well. I realized after 6 years that we weren't happy. The relationship had gone nowhere. He would rarely communicate. And I was getting needy due to neglect. One day something finally clicked in my head and I ended it. It was a mutual ending that went way too smoothly. The fact that it didn't seem to affect him made it a lot easier. But we're still friends and I'm happy I still have him in my life. Couple reasons. The way we deal with problems, personal and interpersonal, is different. He likes to hash it out then and there, while I like to ruminate process for a few days while I form my thoughts on it. It makes it seem like he's confrontational and I'm passive aggressive, which began to wear on us. It was fine at the time, but we knew in 10 years we wouldn't be able to stand one another. He requires more physical contact and affection than I do. We tried to compromise, but it ended up that I felt trapped and he still felt neglected. So it was sad for both of us. The deal breaker. Turns out I'm gay. Well, the deal breaker clears up the physical contact aspect. Almost 2 years into our relationship I had my first set of seizures. He made me go to the alone because he was tired. We were in college at the time, and I ended up having to go home for a semester to get everything figured out with my health. When I came back, I found out he had pretended I just was keeping myself locked in my room all the time whenever our mutual friends would ask where I was. This hurt a lot of feelings until they found out what actually happened. He admitted to being embarrassed at one point before I came back for the summer semester, and he didn't want anyone to know. He expected me to get it fixed and to be done with it. I ended the relationship and made it very clear that I didn't want to be around him anymore. I ended up seeing a lot of ways that I dodged a bullet through talking to friends about things he did while I was gone. I met the man I did marry about 2 years later. I was very clear about my epilepsy and what it entailed before we even started dating. I've had a lot of struggles with medications and seizures since, but he's helped me through all of them. He has never been embarrassed about it or told me how I should handle it. I think he cheated on me. I honestly thought I could get over cheating, but as it was proven, I can't. I could never trust him again, and there is no relationship without trust. He also took me for granted, and I am not going to accept someone who is that comfortable with making me miserable. I really thought he was the love of my life though. I came home from work and all of her stuff was gone. The apartment was empty. So I was all like, B, I'm not putting up with this. You're gone. I sure showed her. First one. A massively jealous girl with a gigantic lack of self-confidence and serious dependence issues. She literally threatened to kill my exes and female friends and colleagues. Plus she was a hardcore Satanist studying gender studies. She later married an Eskimo. We are from Europe and moved to Greenland. I'm not kidding with any of this. Second one. A super temperamental girl with difficulties separating surrounding facts from her emotionally charged opinions. Even the smallest misunderstanding could be turned into hours of competitive shouting, and eventually she would try to start hitting me. When I stopped her from physically beating me by holding her hands until she would stop, I was the abusive monster not able to love anyone. Oh, and apparently she also knew what I was thinking better than me myself. Third one. This was actually my best relationship until that moment of life, but in the end the famous click was missing. We were more like roommates with benefits, so that didn't work out in the long run. I wish her all the best. I've literally worked my way through 9 long-time girlfriends and a plenty of short-time GFs in a backwards manner. I've learned from them many things I do not want to have in my life. Current girlfriend is golden and I love her to bits. From the other side of the coin, I was the dumped. But I can understand why. We were very much in love, very much besotted with each other. but I took that for granted and I did not work at our relationship. She was a very ambitious lady, not for money or power, but for self-improvement and improving others' lives. I was, and still am, a self-loathing coward whose every action or inaction was motivated by fear. I had no ambitions other than spending my life with her. She moved to America, and I was to join her, but I crumbled without her. As the days turned into weeks and into months, I still hadn't made any inroads to joining her. I didn't know how. It seemed so beyond me. I loved her with all my mind and heart and professed it daily but did not show it through action. She was, and I assume still is, an amazing woman. Strong and brave and smart and funny. She left me in 2004 and it destroyed me. And though I confessed it felt out of the blue, it wasn't. I told her she broke my heart. She told me I had been breaking hers for a long time. She was right. I've never really been able to move on. I'm still the scared little boy who she knew would end up becoming the albatross around her shoulders. I'm 42 now, unemployed, living between my sister's living room and my mum's apartment, completely broken by anxiety and depression. She made the right choice because she was too amazing, too ambitious and willing to work at a relationship that I was not because I thought it was perfect. Never take love for granted, because the pain of losing it may fade, but it always lingers and never really dissolves. Last I heard she moved back home and went to law school. If I had to guess I would say she works for some organization that helps people, but I can only guess as I stopped communicating with her. For her sake or mine I don't know. 42 is not so old that you can't get your crap together. Seek help mentally. It sounds like you know your issues. Get the help you need to break free of them. Good luck, friend. He was a man-child. He claims to have changed now. But, after 4 years of things will get better. Things didn't get better when they needed to get better. I realized I was too young and that we had ignored some red flags. Yeah, I took a wrong turn at Albuquerque and ended up in China a few times, too. High school sweethearts. He started making jokes like you can't rape your wife. I was done. Then his parents doubled down and told us that they'd sign the form to allow us to get married before 18. He developed a drug habit, and I found out later that he ended up having a baby with severe deformities with someone else. Poor kid. Didn't make it. Never did he. Cancer before 30. My now ex-girlfriend gave me the "it's not you, it's me" excuse. My response? George Costanza's word-for-word reply. Reddit. What are some funny breakup stories you have? A girl I knew in high school had her boyfriend of 3 years break up with her and start going out with her best friend. His reason? Because her friend had a mechanical arm and he thought it was cool. I kid you not. Legitimate reason. I dump a girl for a cyborg girl. My first boyfriend and I went out for 2 months when we were both 15. No great love, but we lost our virginities to each other. Anyway, I was planning on dumping him and made a date to hang out. I go to his apartment. His mum tells me he went to band practice. I call a couple of times, get no answer, send a pissy text, go home. He later logs onto MSN chat, and we talk for a bit. I think frick it, I can't break up online. Face to face it must be, and try to make another date. He then proceeds to dump me on MSN chat. I have never felt so robbed in my life. I think he saw it coming, and preempted your breakup. I found out my girlfriend of 5 years and the guitar player of my band had been spending a little extra time on the side. Without saying anything about what I knew, I told her we needed to take a break. A week later we played a show with a ton of our friends from high school in the crowd, including her. So I decided to dedicate our song Friends with Benefits to the both of them and called them out for fricking right as we started the song. She beelined for the door immediately. It felt amazing. Haha, your guitarist must have felt so crappy having to play through that. Well done. My friend found out his girlfriend was cheating on him right before their anniversary, so he wrapped up a duffel bag in a gift box and gave it to her. When she opened it he said, "Put all your crap in that and get the frick out of here," or something to that effect. We all got a good laugh, but it was a seriously dysfunctional relationship. I'm surprised a breakup story involving a duffel bag didn't end with a murder-suicide, but props to the dude for being awesome. I once got broken up with via text. More specifically, my boyfriend sent a text message to the girl he wanted to frick, telling her to text me telling me I was dumped and he didn't have enough credit to text me. Dodge a bullet there, girlfriend. I was with a guy for 3 years. I had to move to a nearby city for a job, but we tried to maintain a semi-long distance relationship. One weekend he comes to visit me. I had a bad cold, but we still had sex. Sex with that guy was pretty amazing. The next day he broke up with me out of the blue. Wouldn't tell me why, or what was wrong. I stayed friends with him, and a few months later he asked, "So, who's Matt?" I had no idea what he was talking about. Turns out, during sex I was moaning, oh man, but due to my head cold it came out as oh Matt. Obviously we had some deeper issues, like lack of communication and trust. We did stay friends for a few years after this happened, and the running joke was, I'm going to go hang out with my buddy Matt now. The wife of a friend set me up with a very cute girl who was just too young for me, 10 years an age gap. Even though she was lovely, she never got any of my references, so after a couple of weeks I was able to give her the Bogart speech from Casablanca with minor tweaks, and she thought it was one of the best things anybody had ever said to her. If only I'd had someone to walk away with. That could have been the start of a beautiful friendship. I had a boyfriend all throughout high school. He was so respectful and totally understood that I wasn't ready to do anything past a casual makeout. He never pressured me for anything physical. He was in theater with me, really funny, and generally dressed well. I thought I'd hit the jackpot. We went to separate colleges and mine started a week before his. The first week I told my new roommates I had a boyfriend and it would be long distance for a little bit. They thought it was so romantic that we were staying together. The day his parents dropped him off at school, he called. I was ready to hear all about the move-in. Instead, he broke up with me, but it didn't go how I thought it would. Thanks so much, little duck, for all these years. I wouldn't have made it through high school without you. Seriously. I'm so glad we're free to date other people now. I need your dorm address so I can send you some stuff of yours and some flowers I got you. I will never forget your kindness. What? Why are you breaking up with me? Hysterical crying. Haha, good one. I hope we both meet great guys. Bye. Then it hit me. He was gay. Everyone knew but me. I didn't date again until nearly the end of college, and I made sure he wanted to sleep with me. TLDR. I was unwittingly a beard for 4 years. My girlfriend called me up and said, I'm just calling to inform you that your services will no longer be needed. She was a pretty classy broad like that. You should have told her that her vibrator won't ever actually love her. When she was moving out, she thought it would be okay to leave a bunch of her stuff just sitting on the curb while she made a trip to her new place with a colored of stuff. The guys must have had a pickup truck or something because they even stole the bed. Wish I'd been in town to see the look on her face that day. She deserved it. I found out I was broken up with when he posted on Reddit asking for help to track down a girl from OkCupid so he could ask her out. He knew she was a Redditor but her inbox was full or something. It got to the front page. I downvoted it. Maybe this story isn't right for this thread. I was dating this guy for about 4 or 5 months and decided to break up with him. We were going for a drive and had parked by the river. I was getting my nerve up when he blurts out, let's get married. I just kinda said, I was gonna break up with you. We had just started discussing the situation. Him whining and me saying, sorry, it's not right for me, when the song She Freaking Hates Me comes on the radio. He looks at me and very seriously says, what? Did you call the station and have them play that for you? He was peeing dead serious and I just busted out laughing. You're giving me the it's not you, it's me routine I invented. It's not you, it's me. If it's anyone, it's me. Alright George, it's you. You are dang right it's me. Look, I was just trying to. I know what you were trying to do. Nobody does it better than me. I'm sure you do it very well. Haha, yes. Well, unfortunately you'll never get the chance to find out. I dated a girl in college for a few weeks. I was frisky and somewhat inattentive. She was a little prudish and shy. She broke up with me over the phone, but as soon as I realized what was going down I stopped listening. After we hung up I called a friend of mine to commiserate. He asked why she broke up with me. I said, without realizing the coincidence, She said I didn't listen to her or something. I don't know. I wasn't really listening. You may call me Harry. This is in high school. I was kinda a douche. GF was breaking up with me, and during it my friend John called. He says that he just got free tickets to the Giants game and that if I want to go he was a block away from her house. I told her, listen, I'm sorry you are going to break up with me but I'm going to go have some fun. The car pulls up with John and two attractive, albeit slightly, young ladies. I smugly smile and shrug as I walk away from her house. Getting dumped, like a boss. One of my 13-year-old autistic boy students broke up with his 13-year-old autistic girlfriend. There are 9 students in the class and during free time he wrote her an email. He's learning how to read and write so it said, IHTEU, IDMPU. Translated, I hate you, I dump you. I thought it was great, right to the point. They broke up because she didn't like Johnny Cash. I thought that was legit. That is always a valid reason for a breakup. This isn't exactly a breakup story, because we were never actually girlfriend-boyfriend. I met this girl at a nightclub, and we had a physical spark, with some similar interests, but not much more than that kind of surface interaction. I told her I wanted to keep things casual, go out together and have some fun, etc. And she said that's what she wanted, too. So after going out a few times together in the course of a month, most of which ended with her spending the night, she called me up the following evening after one of our dates and said she had written a poem for me. I said, oh, that's really sweet. Thank you, and then she started reciting a poem telling me that I am essentially a heartless monster taking advantage of her and viewing her as nothing but a hole to fill. Which, to be fair, was about half of the relationship, but I did like having someone to go to the movies with, too. This went to WTF pretty quickly. Dodge a bullet. I crap you not. This happened to me. I was visiting my now ex-GF. Her and her mother were at work, and her siblings at school, so I was alone in the house when someone knocks on the door. When I open it, 4 guys are looking at me. One of them asks, are you Name's boyfriend? For a moment I was dead scared that these guys were here to mug me for whatever reason, but I nod saying yes. The one of them then said, so are we. As my mind explodes in a woofness, I manage to invite them in for a cup of coffee while they explain what's going on. I was told how dude 1 had seen our ex with dude 2 at a party they were all attending. He confronted the other guy the day after, and together they came to the conclusion that if she had 2 BFs, why not more, so they started doing some research. Finding 2 other guys and me. A good half an hour after they arrived, the ex came home. From the hall she called hello hun, and as she walked into the kitchen we all replied hi darling. She went blank face, didn't move or say anything for 10 seconds or so, before hurrying off to the bathroom where Seth stayed for 2 hours. When finally she mustered her courage to come out, all 5 of us broke up with her and left. I still talk to one of the other guys from time to time. TLDR. My now ex had 4 other boyfriends I didn't know about, until they visited me at her place where we all broke up with her. I think there should be some kind of no-fault breakup ritual where any partner can end the relationship without any explanation at all, so long as you haven't been dating for more than 3 months. It would be culturally expected of you to assume that, while nothing is wrong with either of you, it was not meant to be for reasons which are completely not worth contemplating. The time for executing the ritual is limited to 8 minutes. That's a fantastic idea, but it involves applying rationality to romance. For your information, that's similar to dividing by 0. This is more of a post-breakup story, but still relevant emo. My friend's ex was begging him to take her back after she broke it off a few months before. Paul was resolute, polite, and strong-willed, until finally she went in to kiss him, hoping that her touch would earn him back. Paul allowed the kiss to occur, looked her in the eyes, then turned to the side and threw up all over the floor. She left. I had a guy move across the country, Orlando to Seattle, to be with me, even though I told him it was a bad idea, and he dumped me about a month later, saying that he wasn't feeling it. I thought it was pretty funny. On the plus side, Seattle is a pretty decent place to live, especially compared to Orlando, so maybe it was good for him. I received the exact same breakup speech except with an added bonus of, "I just don't want to hurt you again." Who invented all these cliche breakup lines? Hollywood and crappy teen drama from the original Degrassi all the way through to whatever is on these days. My last girlfriend pretty much broke up with me because I wouldn't say I love you. I guess that is a deal breaker, but whatever. I am a machine. At least you didn't say you love cake. Ex-boyfriend went away to college and we tried the distance thing. Well, first he didn't tell me that his ex went to the same college and that they had been getting lunch together regularly. Fine. Didn't care. Then his ex messaged me saying that they were fricking, and when I called him to ask about it he started saying it was my fault for not visiting him. I used his sweatshirt that I still had to mop up cat pee, then mailed it to him. My ex slept with my only female friend in town. Neither of them were sorry despite the fact that I never had a single fight with him until then. Somehow I also managed to get 2 speeding tickets, $300 apiece. Someone stole my bike, and an avocado fell off a tree and onto my face, leaving me with a gnarly black eye. I checked myself into an extended stay because we were living together at the time. Since I was still paying rent on the house and I had randomly booked a ticket across the country to save my sanity and potentially my life from further misfortune, I had to return the house key to my ex. My revenge. I called him to meet me at the coffee house around the corner and James Bond style hid behind some cars and waited for him to leave. Then I proceeded to break into the house, not breaking and entering. I had paid rent for the month, and pour 2 big bags with approx 400 live crickets into his bed. Then I drove around the corner, handed him the key, shut off my phone, and drove to the airport. Somehow he wants to be my friend. 2 years later. Not me but my dad. The way I remember him telling it, his girlfriend told him she was just going to have a night out with the girls, but he had reason to suspect otherwise. So he follows her until she ends up in his fraternity brother's bedroom. My dad waits outside for a long time and then sees them leave together. So my dad slips into the room and sits in a chair facing the door. The guy comes back and is shocked to see him there. "Oh hey, how's it going? Dad's name?" And my dad goes, "I just want to know why." The guy starts stumbling over his words at this point, trying to make excuses and cover up the fact that he'd just banged my dad's girlfriend. So my dad says, "You don't know how, you don't know when. It could be tomorrow, it could be next month, it could be years and years from now, but I'm going to get you back." And then he walks out and just forgets about it, because he knows that guy is going to be looking over his shoulder for who knows how long. My dad didn't need to worry about it anymore. Needless to say, that girl is not my mom. He did break up with her after that. Without that douchebag frat brother you would not exist. She was manipulative and emotionally abusive to me. It took me a long time to see it, but when I did, it was clear as day. I told her it was over, pulled out my phone, and played the score to Terminator as I slow motion got up and walked out the door. I get the impression it was one of those situations where you imagined it would be really badass, but in the end it was just awkward. If I had a girlfriend I would totally break up with her and it would be awesome. There would be a story too and I'd write about it here. I have a few. There's the guy who broke up with me via text. That one stung. Or, my first ever boyfriend who got his best friend to call me and break up with me for him. Ew. And who can forget the one that followed me around like a puppy, refused to let me pay for anything even when I was clear it was my turn, and then randomly dumped me for being clingy and materialistic. I lived with my girlfriend at the time and things weren't going well. I knew we were on the outs and it was only a matter of time before it was over. We argued about something and I had to work early, so I went to bed without really resolving anything. She walks in just as I'm nodding off, makes a snide comment as she heads to the bathroom, and I unknowingly respond with, "This is bulls. Let's break up." I broke up with her and I wasn't even conscious. Oh, I'd post some funny breakup stories, but I've used all of mine about 15 times already. Someone take me out then Crowley dump me. I need more material. Just repost him. Reddit doesn't care anymore anyway. When I was in college, I was dating this one chick. Things started getting a little tense after a while and she invited me over to her dorm to talk about where we were going. All the usual insecure girlfriend BS. While we were talking, Her roommate came back from going shopping and before seeing me shouted out, "You'll never believe the sexy new bras I just got." After turning into the living room and seeing me, she got all red. My girlfriend said she should model them for us. Obviously not one to turn this down. I agreed. Tentatively, she agreed. When she came out, my girlfriend got up and started to make out with her roommate. They joined me on the couch shortly after and told me that they both wanted me. They both stripped down themselves and undressed me, though we had all had kinky threesome sex for the next hour. You bastard. You had me going until I read your name. I broke up with my boyfriend via Skype. I know that sounds like a dong thing to do, but it was a long distance thing and it seemed like the best way to do it. He got extremely upset and yelled, "Number, you're not breaking up with me. I'm breaking up with you." It was the strangest thing ever. I'm pretty sure he told everyone that he dumped me. My favorite breakup story was back in high school while we were playing soccer at lunchtime. My buddy usually plays as goalkeeper and his girlfriend waved him off the field for a moment to say that she thought that they should break up. His response? "Okay," runs back to the game. I sent her 2 cards. One was a "missing you" with something along the lines inside of "I miss the person I liked," and a "get well soon" card with something along the lines of "cause you have some serious problems" on its inside. That might be what I do after my now ex moves her stuff out. Brilliant. Slow hand clap for an hour. Senior year of high school, I was nearing the end of a 16 or so month relationship. I was just going to wait it out a little bit longer to see if things improved, but she beat me to the punch. One day in April it was raining, so practice was cancelled. I drove straight home cause I had to crap, and I mean crap. So I run inside my house, leaving it unlocked, and run to my bathroom and begin my poop. Now, I'm a take my time kind of pooper, so I plug in my headphones, take out my iPod and go to town on some solitaire. About 30 minutes later, I wipe, flush, wash and am on my way out of the bathroom. When I open my door, there she is. My girlfriend is sitting outside the door waiting for me to come out. She had let herself into my house without anyone else there and was waiting outside the bathroom for nearly half an hour while I was pooping. She was crying. She was sobbing. What could I do? She told me she was breaking up with me. I could barely make it out through the sobs. At this point in the relationship, it was more of a relief than a donwa. I had to hide my smile and sense of joy. She ended up staying for almost 2 hours, crying straight through them. It was obnoxious and I stuck it out cause we had spent quite a long time, 4 high school relationships, together. When she left, I called all my friends and we hung out for the first time in a long time. Sorry, I got a little off topic there. TLDR. Drove home from school and left the door unlocked. Went to poop and when I was done she was waiting for me outside the pooper to break it off. She gave me a statue of Buddha. She then said, "I think it would be Buddha if we saw other people." I laughed so hard that I forgot I was getting dumped. It's sort of a breakup story, but I got to use one of my favorite lines from Fight Club. I went ahead and put my dong in crazy about a decade ago. Within the first months of seeing each other she was already acting aloof, denying me sex, giving me the silent treatments and generally trying to control my behavior through passive aggressive bulls rather than talking openly about it. When I called it off she went crazy and pulled a fake suicide routine. I called her bluff straight away because I knew she was crazy, not stupid. Phone rings. Shrevid. "Hi, crazy. What do you want?" "Crazy. I just got a bottle of pills from the doctor. I plan on taking all of them at once and ending it." Shrevid. "So you're staying in then?" She laughed out loud. Even in my early 20s I figured that was a good sign she wasn't really intending to kill herself. A buddy of mine in HS got down on one knee looking like he was about to propose, searching through his pockets for something. He then gets frantic like he has lost the ring. When she asked what was wrong he said, "I have lost my feelings for you," and just walked off. Classy. More butthole why? Not mine, but a friend of mine in high school had the following exchange with his crazy as frick girlfriend while breaking up with her. Her. "You're like a stone. Don't you feel anything?" Him. Yeah, I do feel something. I feel hungry. I feel like I want some freaking pancakes. I broke up with my ex on April Fool's Day. I didn't plan on it, it just happened that way. People still give me crap about it, but honestly it's not a real holiday. I went out with a girl for a few years in high school. Long story short, she cheated on me and we were having it out over the phone. I said something like, "I hope he treats you like crap, you nasty hoe," and then heard her phone click like it had gone to speakerphone. I heard guys in the back and guessed that she was with her new guy, so when she said, "What did you say?" I replied, "I said you gave me AIDS, you nasty ass." The silence on the end of the line was priceless. I hung up and refused to answer her calls. Never talked to her again. This just happened. I met a girl over Mardi Gras. Met on Friday, kissed during parade, talked all Saturday, met up on Sunday to see if the chemistry was there. It was. Turned to physics. I have teeth marks on my shoulder. I slept over her place after the funky fun and treated her to sushi. Like, way too much sushi. "Hey, I like to spoil a girl," she said. "Well, I owe you a dat dog. Fancy hot dog place." Yes, there are fancy hot dogs. Today, after we've been talking for 2 days, she TXTs me. "I don't know how to tell you this, but I'm getting back together with an ex from my hometown." I text back, "Awesome. Now you owe me 2 dat dogs. We're still friends." Serious? Has anyone ever had an ex-boyfriend, girlfriend or partner kill themselves after the breakup? When I was 16, my boyfriend committed suicide after we had a falling out and I threatened to leave. Till this day I remember every detail about what happened afterwards. I was blamed for it from at least a handful of his friends, which is the worst possible thing that could have happened at that time. Lost friends to it when all I needed was support. I was diagnosed with PTSD because of all the backlash and just the guilt. It was terrible and took years of therapy and self-medicating to get over it. I still mourn him and secretly go to his grave. Will talk to him. It's a small comfort. I live in a small town, so I see his family often. It's still awkward 12 years later. I had an ex-boyfriend be hospitalized for a not very serious suicide attempt after our breakup. I got a lot of grief from his family for upsetting him. The irony is that I left the relationship because he was abusing me. His brother eventually found out the truth and gave him heck for it. Apologized to me. It was all drama though. He didn't really want to die, just wanted attention. One of my exes always told me she would kill herself if I broke up with her. Classic abusive, controlling behavior I learned too late. I stuck with the relationship longer than I should have because of this threat, but eventually I had enough and ended it. Shortly after, I was out with friends and I get a call that she took a half bottle of aspirin and called an ambulance for herself. They pumped her stomach and shipped her to the county mental health hospital. She spent all her time previous to this on an online roleplay group set in a mental hospital. I think she deluded herself into thinking she would meet all their awesome misunderstood characters there. Instead, she got a roommate who constantly screamed at the demon she claimed lived in her vagina. My ex refused to give the doctors her parents or anyone else's contact info but mine. The doctor called me and told me they could let her out in as little as 3 days. I told them to keep her as long as they could. 2 weeks later they finally had to let her out. I feel like I should feel guilty for leaving her there, but I don't. Not after all the crap she did to me. Not after a breakup, but the very first girl I ever asked out not only went home and killed herself, she specifically mentioned my asking her out was what pushed her over the edge. That if 00 Ranger driver is the only guy interested in me, I'd rather not be here anymore. I was 16. Dude, not to speak ill of the dead, but that is some grade A bitchiness right there. I'm sure you're a perfectly lovely person, and that you really weren't what pushed her over the edge. She was using you as one last lash out. At least that's what I think. I was in my early 20s when my GF of 5 years cheated on me and dumped me. It was too much for me. I was blindly in love with her and had dropped out of university cause of it. So I decided to end my life by jumping from highest building of city. I had left home to do it, but my cousin sensed something was wrong, followed me and stopped me. There I opened up to him and cried like a baby, but it helped. PS. Sorry, English isn't my first language. Your cousin is a hero. Throwaway time. I dated a guy with bipolar depression when I was in high school. When he was in the middle of one of his manic episodes, he was the most wonderful, friendly, thoughtful, spastic person in the entire world, in my 15-year-old mind. When he would fall from a manic episode, however, things got dark really quickly. He would sit in his room and dig a screwdriver into his wrist while I would sit on the phone with him, crying, begging him not to hurt himself. He would talk about killing himself as if it were not a big deal, as if it were inevitable that he would end his own life. Once he actually attempted suicide while we were on the phone, so I hung up and called his mom, who had him admitted to a hospital where he was put on suicide watch for 72 hours. During school hours he would have panic attacks and I would be pulled from class to sit with him and remind him to breathe deeply as he sat huddled and shaking in some abandoned hallway. He pushed everyone away and pulled me closer. He would talk about how we would get married, what our children's names would be. I was young and had really low self-esteem, so I thought I was lucky to be dating such a handsome, committed young man. As time went on and I got older, I came out of a fog and saw the relationship for what it really was. If he was feeling depressed, he wouldn't acknowledge me for days. If he was manic, he would flirt with other girls, or worse. I walked in on him getting a lap dance from someone once. That's a story for another day. I was afraid to break up with him because I knew he wouldn't take it well, but talking with other people about it gave me strength, so I did it. That night, he tried to drown himself in the ocean. Thankfully I called some of our mutual friends and told them what I had done, and that someone should go to his house to make sure he hadn't done anything stupid. They found him at the beach. He was inconsolable, but they talked him out of taking his own life. I am grateful for that every day. Now he is dating someone else and seems happy. I hope that his life is less of a roller coaster now than it was when we dated. Sorry for the wall of text. TL. High school boyfriend had bipolar depression and would do crazy pseudo-suicidal stuff all the time. Our breakup resulted in him trying to drown himself in the ocean. I was only 14. She was 16. It's the worst thing that has ever happened to me. Her life was a living heck, and me ending it was the straw that broke the camel's back. It was 4 years ago, and I still sometimes feel like if I had handled things differently she might still be here. Because of that regret, I ended up in a bad off and on relationship with another girl that has lasted all the way through high school. I just recently got the guts to break up a relationship for the first time since that happened. After that I finally felt like I came full circle, like I had finally gotten over that last mental block. If a relationship isn't good for both people involved, it isn't a relationship you need to be in. And if you know someone that is depressed or just needs a little help every once in a while, help them before it may literally be too late. A girl I went to high school with hung herself after breaking up with her boyfriend. It was immensely sad. Her life was the kind you see pictures of and wish was your own. She was beautiful, kind and wealthy. She just didn't realize in that moment that the pain was temporary. Yes, she emotionally, verbally and physically abused me. Stupidly I decided to stay friends with her. I went over to her place to visit, ended up staying over. She took all her pills while I was asleep. I found her. Freaking selfish B. I think it was a final I told you so. Probably gonna get buried but frick it. I had a friend who was dating a guy for a year or two, and after a rough breakup, her ex went through a pretty rough spell that culminated in him walking onto a freeway and throwing himself in front of an oncoming truck. He got himself extremely mangled and stuck in extremely serious condition in the hospital for many months afterwards. Needless to say, it devastated both my friend and her ex's family. My friend struggled a lot with blaming herself, as would be natural for anyone with an ounce of empathy or compassion. However, through what turned out to be a long and painful process, my friend and her ex-boyfriend's family discovered that ultimately, the guy needs to be held as responsible for his own actions and given the appropriate support and help that he needs. And that having others shoulder some of the blame doesn't help him and just spread more pain around. Of course, it's good for people to be introspective and make sure they weren't cruel to the person or did something out of the ordinary that drove him to try to take his own life. But my friend and her ex's family knew that she acted the best she could under the circumstances, and that the guy's extreme reaction came from a place of serious insecurity and depression. While relationships have effects on that insecurity and depression, ultimately the guy's choices were dictated by something deep inside him, not outside. For anyone else to blame themselves for someone else's suicide, attempted suicide only creates deep wounds in innocent people, and maybe even hurts their ability to help the victim. Because people who suffer mental health problems are just that, victims. Get the aid they need. Ultimately, my friend and her ex's family decided that what was best was for my friend to disengage almost entirely from her ex's life, and allow the guy's close family and friends support him in his physical and emotional recovery. A year or two after the accident, the guy is still facing struggles, but overall has figured out how to self-subsist and hopefully will be safe for the near future. TLDR. Blaming yourself for someone's choices leads to a downward spiral of pain. When an ex takes drastic measures, do your best to support them but don't cast blame on yourself. I really like that his family didn't decide to blame her like in so many other stories in this thread. Didn't die, but relevant nonetheless. I dumped my girlfriend because she was still fooling around with her ex behind my back, but we still had a few weeks of renting left, so we stayed living in the same place. One night she went into her room and texted me with "I'm sorry," implying she'd done something to herself. I very carefully opened the door as I honestly thought she might be hanging on the other side of it and didn't want to break her neck if she was. Turns out she swallowed a whole packet of paracetamol. I tried to make her vomit but she wouldn't. Her brother wouldn't take her to the hospital so I had to fricking do it. Spent about 5 hours in the waiting room. She checked out fine as expected. Texted my boss explaining and he was totally cool, even let me get paid for the day I missed. I chewed her out hugely about it because I was so pissed off and felt it was basically attention seeking. And yeah, I don't speak to her anymore. Got the frick out of there and found someone who wasn't a total psychopath. When I was 17, we had only been together a few weeks but he was so controlling. He told me what to wear, who to see. He even started planning our wedding. I phoned him asking to meet. I took my friend to stand a bit away in case it kicked off. We sat at a cafe. He got down on one knee and proposed. My response: "I brought you here to end our relationship. I want it to end and I am severing all ties with you." I got a phone call a week later off his mom saying he had odd on his medicine and left a note for me. I've not read that note and I burned it. Didn't go to his funeral. Everyone paints him as a son. People post on his FB saying how he was an angel who didn't deserve to be taken. Meanwhile his friends hate me because of what I did. I have no regrets. I moved on with my life and I found happiness with the person who I am going to spend the rest of my life with. You didn't do anything wrong. You got yourself out of a dangerous situation before it escalated. This will get buried, but reading this thread reminded me of something I hadn't thought about for years. When we were 19, a friend of mine broke up with her boyfriend. I was away for school and didn't get a chance to talk to her, so I don't know the specific reasons and circumstances around the breakup, but he apparently took it very hard. A few weeks later he hangs himself in the woods. His parents are horrible about it, blaming my friend, showing up at her house, yelling at her parents about how it is all her fault. They also told her she wasn't allowed to attend the funeral, that she was a W and that she drove him to suicide. She was devastated and, partly because her parents are buttholes who never stood up for her or took her side, felt deeply responsible for his death. A month after he died, she hung herself from the same tree as he had. That's one of the saddest things I've ever read. I'm sorry that memory had to be brought back up again, but if anything I hope you feel some sense of closure. When I was 16, my first boyfriend broke up with me over the phone while in Florida. He then called my mom in the next room and told her I had been molested and who had done it. He was the only one who knew. The next day I tried to kill myself. I was hospitalized for a while. A lot of people make fun of me and tell me I tried to kill myself over a boy, which couldn't be farther from the truth. I sunk into a deep depression after that. I tried to kill myself again, was hospitalized numerous times, dropped out of high school, and still go to weekly therapy. Not really because he broke up with me, but he called my mom and told her my biggest secret. It ruined me, my trust. Who does that? When I was 18, my ex-boyfriend killed himself. Our relationship ended because he had so many problems mentally and he was self-medicating with drugs and alcohol, which made him extremely unpredictable, irrational and just too much for me to cope with. He was 25 and had a young daughter he was not allowed to see. For a long time I did blame myself for ending it with him when he was so vulnerable, but in time I realized I was a very tiny part of a very large picture and I was certainly not the sole catalyst for his actions. He had so much pain in his life. I'm convinced that he would have done it anyway at some point. Sounds a bit cold, I suspect, but I could not live the rest of my life carrying a guilt for something that was not my fault. I posted this about a month ago. My ex-girlfriend from college attempted suicide when I broke up with her. I, 35 now and female, broke up with her right before we moved in together because I felt trapped in the relationship and didn't want to worsen that by moving in with her. She would say things like, "If you ever leave me, I will kill myself," and she would cut herself in the middle of the night while I slept if I didn't have sex with her. She made me feel like I was her only source of emotional support because she had recently come out of the closet to her unsupportive parents. Anyway, I broke up with her on the phone. Her last words to me were "you freaking b," and she hung up. Her parents called my mom later that night saying she was on the psych unit of a hospital, had been found passed out with an empty bottle of vodka and a butcher's knife covered in blood. She was alive and going to be okay. For the record, her parents found out about all the self-cutting and still didn't really do anything to help her. When she got out of the hospital, she proceeded to sleep with people and then call me to tell me about it, to see if I would get jealous, write me letters pleading for me to get back with her, etc. After a couple months, she met a girl in a different state and got married to her. But over the next few years, she continued to stalk me. She sent a stack of letters we had written to each other to my mother, to out me to her. She asked a friend who lived in my city to slash my car tires. She sent mass emails to all my friends, telling them how horrible I was. She would email any girl that I was dating. I don't know how she found out, and tell them to stay away from me. It just gradually tapered off over the next few years. She is just cunning, bitter, and smart enough that I still worry about her showing up from time to time. I have an ex who tried to kill himself regularly, both during our relationship and afterwards. He didn't succeed, and is now living a fairly normal life, with 3 daughters who make him want to be a better person. I blamed myself at first, when the suicide threats started. I wasn't good enough, I was failing him, etc. All the typical feelings. I started talking to counselors and his mother in order to figure out how to handle it. Eventually, and sadly, I got to the point where it had happened so often that I didn't care anymore. I just told him not to do it where I would have to clean it up. He emotionally beat me down to a shell of myself, and I wasn't capable of feeling anything or doing anything. It finally ended when he threw me out. Drama and suicide threats continued after the relationship ended. He ended up in the jailed version of the psych ward, and I was contacted by the staff there to get more info about his past behaviors. I told them everything. I hoped he would get help. Flash forward 4 years, and I'm in a normal, healthy marriage where my husband understands what I went through and is very patient with me. My advice would be to talk to someone, a therapist or similar, because you can get very messed up. Eventually, a new normal life is possible. Something similar related happened to me, or my mom, however you wanna slice it. So basically my dad had been struggling with depression for several years and was threatening my mom to kill himself. He did this in response to her asking for a divorce separation. No cheating or anything too messed up, she just didn't want to stay married to him for pretty valid reasons. Kids over 20 years old and moved out. Anyway, he had abandonment issues from his childhood, which is what caused him to get depressed, and then he threatened suicide steadily for several years, keeping her in the house by basically saying, "If you leave me, I'll kill myself." My mom decided to do it anyway cause it was like living in a mental prison of constant threat and terror. He went crazy in response and the threats moved to me and my sibling. Like, "Help me get your mother back, prevent her from leaving or I'll kill myself." At first this destroyed me, but a few weeks later I just said okay whenever he threatened it and didn't really care that much anymore. Ended up I had to say basically I'm leaving. I had been crashing with him recently. Unless you promise to never talk about killing yourself again. Actually left and stayed with a friend but kept coming back for hours days. He would always been hinting at suicide or something, but I would put him in his place. In the end he never really meant to kill himself. It was just a manipulation device. Our relationship is ruined forever though. We used to be pretty close. Sorry if this isn't directly a response to the question, but I guess it's the same sort of situation. This brought back memories of something that I haven't thought about in a long time. When I was a freshman in college I got semi-serious with a girl on my dorm floor but broke it off because something seemed a little off about her. She started getting really strange. Her roommate said she started doing some sort of witchcraft and starting fires in their room. Something was mentioned about suicide, but to the best of my knowledge it didn't go beyond that. She left school suddenly and was never heard from again. In retrospect, I was a jerk about the whole thing and she didn't deserve being treated the way I and others treated her. I hope she got help. My boyfriend's brother-in-law killed himself after my boyfriend's sister left him. He shot himself in the head at the spot that he proposed to her. None of us thought he would do it, but at 3 the next morning, my boyfriend walked into my room and told me what happened. I pretty much hated the guy, but I almost threw up upon hearing that he had actually killed himself. My best friend did this when his girlfriend left him. I'm not entirely sure if that was the reasoning behind it all though. No message or anything, no indication. Miss that guy. I dated a guy in college who was depressed and talked about suicide. I wanted to break up with him for a while but agonized over how to do it without it resulting in his suicide. After much consideration, I broke up with him, immediately called his parents and said they needed to come get him, stay with him and help him get through it. They ended up putting him in therapy to help him through his depression. Later, he and I became friends, although I never expected this outcome, and his parents thanked me for doing something that was obviously very difficult. Still one of the hardest things I've done, but I felt not making that call was akin to letting him commit suicide. My advice: if you are worried the person you are leaving will do something to themselves or others, seek assistance from someone they trust who can be there when you can't. I once dated a girl with bipolar disorder. After I broke up with her and she realized she couldn't manipulate me back, she overdosed on painkillers. Fortunately her mum came home early and she was taken to hospital, and then my ex texted me a photo of her in the hospital blaming me. That was such a fun relationship. I was very young, had a boyfriend 10 years older than me, threatened suicide on multiple occasions if I broke up with him. I finally said to him, what funeral home should I send flowers to? He did not kill himself, though I sweated it out for a few weeks. You manipulative son of a b. Honestly, that is such a bad butt thing for a young girl to say to a manipulative man 10 years her senior. My cousin once dated a guy who had serious depression. She wanted out because he was way too clingy, and she felt really uncomfortable around him. She left him and about a month later he committed suicide. This is kind of the only example of what I have seen, but she was bothered by the decision. I personally don't know how she exactly felt or was affected by it, but she was in a new relationship about a year after that. I was the person who almost committed suicide after a breakup about a year ago. It was very closely related to my drug and alcohol addiction, and my ex at the time knew that I was having serious problems. She felt somewhat responsible for me and encouraged me to get help, whether it was to go to rehab or a psychologist. Obviously I didn't kill myself, but I was dangerously close of overdosing, and she knew that. I know she worried about me and took my problems to heart. There is more to tell if you would like further information. It's not something I really get into anymore. I came close to this happening and I can't imagine it happening to anyone. BF, at the time, and I were both 19. He had a lot of mommy issues and he was in counseling for it, so I know there was other stuff going on with him. We were only together for a few months. We had known each other since first grade, and we had a really big fight. I don't even remember what the fight was about now. We were living together and I left, intending to stay the night elsewhere, but I decided to go back at 4 AM. Me going back is the only thing that saved his life. When I got there, he was in bed, so I crawled in with him. He was slurring and not making sense, but I assumed he was just sleepy and maybe drank something. Then he started burping, this weird loud burp, over and over. I thought back to a time a friend of mine said they tried to kill themselves with pills and how it made them burp a lot. I thought no way, he wouldn't do that. But I got up and started looking for an empty bottle and, sure enough, I found one. An empty bottle of pain pills in the bathroom. He had gotten a marker and blacked out all of the words on the bottle except for the word pain. So I was sure he really did it. I went back to him and tried to wake him. I asked him how many he took. He was disoriented and couldn't answer. His eyes were glossy and he wasn't moving. We were just 2 blocks from the hospital, so I got a neighbor to help me get him into the car and I took him there. Had someone get him and they took him and pumped his stomach. The doctor said another hour and he would have had organ failure. It fricks with me. Even to this day, almost 10 years later, the thought of how I would have found him the next day, or if I had ignored the burping, I could have woken up to him dead next to me. My heart goes out to anyone who has had to go through anything like this. It takes a toll on such an emotional level. I was, or we were, rather, 15. We'd been together 2/3 of 3 years. There were a couple months where her family moved, but we got back together the day they moved back. Her dad was an abusive drunk and claimed he had his crap in order, and restarted the custody battle. I couldn't deal with it as a boyfriend. I begged to stay friends, cause she was my best friend on top of everything else. She said she needed so time to think. Okay, mid-story TLDR. She started a bunch of crap about me. So 2 months later, when she calls me as I'm getting ready for bed, I politely told her to frick off. Kidding, I wasn't a bad person at that point. I told her the same thing she told me about being friends. Not even an hour later she slit her wrists and her mom found her when she went to get her up for school the next morning. It hurt a lot. I can talk more about it if anyone's interested when I'm home in a couple hours. Didn't happen to me, but I remember when I was about 15 or 16 years old, 25 now, a girl in my class broke up with a boy from a school in a neighboring town of the same age. He took his own life shortly after. I didn't know him, but a lot of people from my school did. I lived in a very small town and this hit the whole community pretty hard. They even shut down school for a few days because a lot of the kids were just kind of in a daze and clearly needed some time to process things. It is very sad that this is a huge cause for suicide. If anyone here is suffering from a bad breakup, I promise you, no one is worth ending your own life. It will get better. I'm only 25, but I've been in a few serious relationships and through some really hard breakups. I've been in some pretty dark places mentally, and even though at first it seems like it's the end of the world, when it's over, you will get over it with time, and the best thing you can do is talk with anyone that will listen. Have you ever broken up with someone and regretted it later? If so, why? My first girlfriend. I wouldn't say I regret it because I am who I am today because of the decisions I made. It took me a lifetime of bad and sometimes abusive relationships to realize that actually everything I could have wanted and needed was in her. She was truly a good soul, and in my naivety I thought there would be many others like her. But life doesn't work that way. Last I heard she had a husband and a kid. Couldn't be happier for her. How long after did you realize how special she was? Yeah, she was my first girlfriend. Dated her for 6 years. Nothing wrong in the relationship, but I assumed something was wrong because she was my first. I didn't know what other relationships were like for comparison. So when I started dating other girls I realized I screwed up. My BF is my first and only real relationship, so I've had these kinds of doubts before. But reading your comment made me happy I never acted on them. Broke up with a girl because she was about to head back to her fancy college and I assumed she'd quickly break up with me after a few weeks there. I was determined to not be the one getting dumped, so I did it first. Turns out she was devastated and was planning on making a long distance thing work. I felt terrible, but I couldn't just take it back, so I decided to give her some space. Half a year later, at Christmas break, we started talking again and quickly got back together. I went back to school myself and we've been married 13 years. I think the breakup was necessary. Probably made you both realize how much you needed each other, and with that in mind, the long distance relationship worked. If you had just tried doing it long distance without the breakup, you could have probably given up easy on the relationship with the struggles that come with distance. Broke up with my girlfriend because she didn't really fit into my idea of who I wanted to be with. About 2 weeks later it suddenly hit me. She was a kind person who genuinely liked and accepted me. WTF was I doing? Asked her to reconsider and she said no. We remained friends and a few weeks later I asked her to reconsider again. She said no because she didn't know if I was just lonely or wanted to be with her. Told me to wait a few months and then decide if I wanted to ask her again. We've been married for close to 10 years and I've never been happier. That's pretty sweet and a happy ending. I ended what had been a couple years of a toxic relationship. It had been impacting my friendships with others. I think likewise for her. We never actually fought with each other, so it was hard to see for a long time. but in the end we were holding each other back and needed to go our separate ways. 5 years later my life is so much better, yet I've regretted it since the day it ended. Luckily she moved far away and we both know it's best to not stay in contact online. I think about her a lot though and regret it had to end the way it did. Because I was in a bad place and I felt like I didn't deserve being with someone good, I went with people that fit my idea of myself, i.e. crappy. This was generally regarded by everyone involved as a bad move. Do not recommend. Date above your perceived station in life. Not only because you deserve it, because it will make you a better person. I went through the exact same thing. Luckily he took me back. Yep, I broke up with my first girlfriend and regretted it. We were both still virgins. But I didn't want to be, while she was a devout Catholic who wanted to save herself for marriage. I respected that, but 17-year-old me felt unhappy feeling like I was never going to get to experience sex, though I still happily dated her because she was my first and I was happy enough to be able to tell my friends that I had a girlfriend. I broke up with her, but after going through that experience and feeling how terrible it was for both of us, first heartbreak and all that, I turned around and won her back. I did it for the wrong reasons. I felt guilty for hurting her, and felt in retrospect like breaking up over sex was a shallow thing to do. Thing is, the spark was gone after that so she broke up with me soon after anyway. It was for the best. We were incompatible in other ways that became apparent later, but hearing her say I don't love you anymore was perhaps the most savage emotional gut punch of my young life. And that was how I learned that sex matters, and sexual incompatibility can ruin relationships. And B, sometimes, a relationship can be broken badly enough that it can't be fixed. I don't regret breaking up with anyone, but I do regret not giving some people a chance. In my life I've had some genuinely awesome women that were interested in me and I let them slip away for toxic and horrible relationships. I could have been part of a team where we elevated one another and together became better than we could have alone. Instead I just couldn't stop myself from settling down into toxic and hateful relationships. I wasted my youth and can never get it back. Shortly after the most crushing breakup I had, I found a girl a few years younger than me with 2 kids just looking for an adult friend. I was clear about not looking for a relationship and we started hooking up. A couple months in I really liked this girl and asked her to make it official. She agreed and I was super into her, but awkward with the kids. She never pushed me to be more involved with them too fast and the kids and I met slowly and then more and more. We actually broke up a few times. I would end it because it got too scary with the kids and then we would get together and then she would end it because it was feeling too serious. On and off for about 2 years until I got offered a massive promotion 12 hours away and took it. We split up for real, which lasted about 8 months. Then by fluke I ran into her while visiting my parents and we rekindled. I didn't even realize how much I had missed her until then. We've been doing long distance for about 9 months now and I'm looking for a job back in town. I've proposed, she accepted, and she's constantly sending me links to dream homes we should look at. The kids and I love each other and when she works I've been taking the kids to school and picking them up and they both call me dad. I think the biggest thing that kept breaking us up is that we both went into it refusing to want a real relationship and directly looking to not fall in love, and let our stubbornness and egos, which we both have plenty of, refuse to let us reevaluate or be the first to tell the other we were wrong. Pretty sure this is a plot to several different rom-coms LMAO. Yes and no. I was in a 4-year relationship with someone I always considered to be not the one. Turns out it was all fear of commitment. I left the relationship because from the get-go, I thought it would be over soon. It was a great relationship. She accepted me in the most part. We had some personality shocks but I came to accept that I loved her and that I would marry her eventually. Problem is, that feeling of you're losing lots of opportunities never went away and the personality shocks pilled on it. Eventually my fear of commitment got to me and I broke up with her in 2019. Since then, I learned about that fear, regretted the breakup, talked deeply with her about that, and learned that I was not wrong in breaking up with her. The relationship was making me miserable, and having a toll on her too, and it wouldn't get better unless I learned what I learned this last year, and that would probably not be enough. It was the right decision, but for the wrong reasons. I don't regret it anymore. My 2020 would be way less lonely if I hadn't broken up with her, but I learned a lot about myself and still have a friend in her. We're not as close as we once were, but sometimes that happens. My point is, you might miss the relationship later, even if it makes you feel bad now. That's okay. Just remember that breaking up is as much a commitment as staying together. Wow, I love that last phrase, breaking up is as much a commitment and staying together. I dated a single mom in 2012 to 2013. Gorgeous, smart, funny, affectionate, liked everything I did including football and metal. Got me an engraved flask for my birthday with an inside joke written on it. Broke things off because an ex had come back into my life. Huge mistake. Not only did things not work out with the ex, but I burned the bridge with the other woman. She blocked me on FB and IG. I still have the flask and it pains me to look at it. Oof, a friend of mine has a similar story, except he has a watch. Yes, my most recent partner was pretty amazing, and he was the only person I've ever met who was actually willing to fight for me and not turn away at the first sign of minor inconvenience. And I rejected and dismissed him repeatedly because I was too hung up on stupid things that didn't really matter. I could have had the family I desperately need had I not been a complete and utter idiot jerk. This sounds familiar to me. I think it was her mom controlling her. Poor girl. Wish I could have been what she needed. Yes and no. Yes, I regretted it because I missed, and still miss, and loved, and still love him more than anything. No, because it was a long time of neglect, and I couldn't take it anymore. I dated a woman few months after a breakup from a previous relationship that lasted a few years. Maybe 6 months in, I realized I wasn't able to give her my heart because I was still hung up on my ex. I explained this to her and she told me she was willing to work through it with me. Unfortunately, I had become pretty depressed, thinking I was a failure for not being able to really love this woman who was perfect for me. I even made one of those pro-con lists to help me decide what to do, and there was nothing in the con side. We had everything in common, enjoyed the same movies, had many of the same friends, had similar goals in life, etc. We had become very close friends, and that's where the barrier seemed to be for me. My heart wasn't free to go further. I broke up with her and regretted it every day, wishing I could be over my ex. Maybe 6 months later, I was in a place where I thought I was ready to try being in a relationship again. This woman had moved on and seemed really happy with the guy she was dating, so I let the idea of us being together fade. After her, I dated a woman who would break up with me when she went back for her final semester of college because she felt she was gay. I never had any idea. I was disappointed because she was a really sweet woman, but there were no hard feelings between us. She needed to be honest with who she was, and we stayed good friends for a couple years until she moved out of state. After her, there was a terrible relationship where I was cheated on for a couple years, and then I met my wife. We've been married for 20 years and I've never looked back and wished things had worked out differently. All my bad decisions and pain led me to her, and this is where I want to be. I'm glad for you that it worked out at the end. I regretted it even as I was doing it, but I knew it was the right thing to do. He was my first serious BF, but we were very young. There was a lot of love, but we developed some unhealthy communication and were hurting each other. Neither of us really knew how to fix it or whether it even could be fixed. I hated hurting him and walking away was painful, but it was necessary. The way things were, that relationship was not going anywhere good. All in all, I regret the pain I caused, but I'm still certain that it was the right thing to do. Yes, we were together 4 years. She was the first person I wasn't related to that said that they loved me. I was hooked. I was unhappy for a majority of the relationship. I was cheated on. She made me hate myself. I missed the routine of it. I missed going to our places. I missed the inside jokes. I missed the friend she was. The friend that attaches to the end of the word girlfriend. I am thankful that when she came crawling back 2 years later, married and lonely for me, I was strong enough to say number. I broke up with my boyfriend because he was avoiding taking care of some PTSD issues he had from his time in the army. When we first started dating, he was talking to a therapist weekly and then slowly dropped off until he hadn't seen someone for almost a year. I was also not doing well. I felt like I was drowning and I couldn't see myself carrying him. 2. He got his crap together. I made some mistakes of my own. When we started talking again, I was picking up the pieces and he wanted to help me. I'd never felt so loved in my entire life. I didn't deserve him, but he wanted to be there and I finally wanted to let him. We started over, dating again, working as a team to manage our collective issues. We eventually got engaged and then got married a year later. When I first met him, I thought he was the love of my life. And even though the path wasn't neat and tidy, I wasn't wrong. He's the good things. I'm dang lucky and I know it. I'm glad you're happy with him. I regret my most recent breakup. Essentially, I freaked out because he liked me too much, and after a long series of boyfriends and an ex-husband that had made me feel like a burden that should be grateful for their presence, I didn't know how to just enjoy it. Ultimately, I sabotaged the relationship rather than let myself fall in his eyes, which I guess I've done anyway. My college girlfriend. She was my soulmate. She understood me, always had my back, and put up with my BS. But being young and stupid, I thought I needed to sow some wild oats before I settled down. So off I went to sow, and when I was finished, she had already settled down with another guy. This is what my college boyfriend did to me. I was devastated as I didn't understand why he was breaking up with me when there was nothing wrong with our relationship. It ended up giving me a bunch of insecurity issues. Yes, but not because of the woman I was leaving. We were together for 3 years and we ran our course. That was fine and it wasn't that hard to break up. But she had a dog, a tiny little Jack Russell Terrier who was already 12 years old when I first met her. That dog was my spirit animal and we just bonded instantly. She followed me around everywhere and I love that dog bits. She was a tough nut, but she was really frozen due to age, so I bought her clothes so she could be both warm and a badass at the same time. It doesn't show in that picture, but she was really confident in these clothes. When we broke up, it sucked because I had to leave this sweetheart behind. She wasn't mine. And then 4 months later she passed away. The last thing I did was slam the door behind me, and I have so much regret in my heart that I didn't take a moment to say goodbye to this dog, or stayed for another 4 months before breaking up so I could have been there for her at the end. It sucks. After a breakup with someone, you lose them and the people and stuff that came with them. The pets and friends can hurt more than the breakup. There's also adjusting to a new routine, like no more squash games on Tuesday with them or having to find a new running buddy. Not really broken up because we weren't dating, but at the time, she was a close friend of mine. Used to play video games with each other until late 2015. Then we started to distance each other for a bit but still kept in contact. I completely stopped talking to her around early 2017 because I was blindly obsessed with another girl who became toxic to me a year later, and it took me 6 months to recover from that. Last year, with the lockdown and all, I started reminiscing about my old friends that I have left behind and remembered her. It took me a few weeks to consider if I should message her again because of how long since we last talked, even though we never ended on a sour note. I eventually messaged her and asked if she remembers me. She said not really, although she still had my number saved, but was still really friendly and pretty much the same person as I remembered from 2015. We still are in contact now, but we are both busy with our own studies, and I think she may have slowly remembered who I was before. Planning to talk to her more and maybe meet up with her for the first time by the end of the year. I knowingly dated them while they were in an abusive relationship, and before I knew about the abuse, I told them it wasn't fair for me to have them while someone else loves them, and that the abuser was the better choice. They came back over a month later covered in bruises and told me about everything, from their partner beating them to cheating and making this person watch, and that they didn't feel guilty for coming back to me because I helped them realize that they don't deserve the crap their ex put them through. So I got them in the end, but I still feel so awful for sending them back to that hellhole even if I didn't know. We're in the process now of getting the abuser to agree to either move out or let them move in with me. I hope they are okay now. Yes, I broke up with my ex about 2 years ago because I was going through depression. I needed time to recollect and reflect, and I just lost the feeling of being happy, and I lost feelings for any relationship I had, whether family, intimate or friendly. I regret it now because she was the best girl I've ever dated. But now there's no chance of going back with her. She could have gotten me through those times, but I just didn't know that. I fricked up. Big time. She was a great girl. I was really sick. Got her to break up with me. Hello self-sabotage. I don't really regret it because she's doing well, and so am I. But still, sometimes, I do think of her, and the nostalgia hits you. I learned so many good habits from her. We had fantastic conversation. She was oozing brains. She taught me a lot. She was really affectionate and understanding. She tried to be there for me, but I never really let her in. She had her own issues, but overall, she was a fantastic human being, and someone you could grow old with. I do regret that I am never going to see her, and I am not going to get an opportunity to apologize for the way I was. Reddit. If you have something to say to someone, say it. Trust me, just do it. You sound like my ex. Hope you really are doing well. That breakup still hits sometimes, despite my being in a healthy relationship with someone I love very much. I broke up with the love of my life because I thought she was too good for me. She didn't think that and tried very hard to convince me I was just scared. She was absolutely correct, but I wouldn't listen and I pushed her away. It is hands down the worst mistake I ever made in my life. Kids, learn from my disastrous mistakes and get off my lawn. Tough question to answer honestly. Immaturity, mostly, combined with my own doubts and insecurities. Then life sometimes just gets in the way of your plans when you're young. You sometimes don't understand what you want or need in life. It's for some, not until you've lived a little, laughed, cried, smiled, a little, until you kind of understand who you are and what you want. Everybody has the story of the one girl who got away. Question is, did you miss out on an idealistic version of a person you knew, or did you find a person who helps you to be an ideal version of the person you would like to be? My most recent ex was a really good person underneath what I consider to be an alcoholic, mean girl who didn't like me all the time. I got into my current relationship right as that one ended, because I realized this new one, current fiancé, actually liked, at first, now genuinely loves, me, but I regret the breakup, in a way. She had a 2-year-old kid and I loved him a lot during the year we dated. The boy's father was a deadbeat and cheated on my ex while she was pregnant and then left her for the cheatie. I regret leaving so hastily because, from her perspective, I too left her for someone else. I guess, not just her perspective, as that's basically what happened. But I just wasn't happy and my time with her was a drunken mess of constant fighting and anger. I just know she was a good person down deep inside, just deeply flawed due to a lifetime of being failed by those she loved. And I just added to that and failed her one last time. Sometimes there's no nice way out of a relationship. No matter what you do or say, it's not going to be nice or feel good immediately. But if you've got to get out of it, then that's what's best for everyone in the long term. Try to forgive yourself is all I can say. Regretted not getting back together when she offered. We broke up on a camping trip the 5th of July some years ago because she was having a hard time with the long distance. She said she'd still like to be my +1 to my mother's wedding in mid-August, and I still wanted her there, so that was the next time I saw her. On that trip she said she had had the space she wanted to think and she wanted to get back together. I was still too hurt from the breakup to accept at the time, telling myself that if it didn't work once it would never work. I guess that gave her the closure to move on, and we grew apart after that. By the time I got over myself and my hurt feelings, it was already too late. She's still the only person I've ever been in love with. Because it was a stupid reason. She was the most beautiful woman inside and out that I ever met, but my immature butt thought there might be something better. There never was. Kind of. I don't regret breaking up with him at the time, but a few years later I wonder, man, if I was this mature back then, that relationship could have been way healthier. Had a crush on this girl for 2 years who was affectionate but never displayed any serious attachment. Then I started seeing someone else after I got tired and she was amazing, kind, smart, but about 2 weeks in, The long-lasting crush feelings were still there, so I ended the relationship because it felt somewhat unfair towards the girl I was seeing. I ended up eventually with this crush. I very quickly realized she was the most abusive, toxic person I've ever met in my life. I have never with anyone been yelled at so much, fought so much, blamed for the smallest things. She once stopped talking to me for 2 days because I accidentally got off the bus one stop too early when taking her to see a movie. We had to walk 10 extra minutes. It was over 5 years. I still regret breaking up with this girl who was one of the nicest people I've ever met for this abusive crush. I dated a really great woman in my mid-20s, 30s now, who I broke up with for an assortment of reasons. The primary of which was that I just wasn't happy. My life was moving in a really tough direction. Joined the military, and I wasn't sure she had the gumption to make necessary choices to have a successful life. I wanted perfection. I wanted a storybook version of love. It doesn't exist. I undermined my own feelings through negative thoughts, and only came to realize later that she was in many ways exactly what I needed. She was loyal, devoted, supportive, and firm. She was the only person I'd ever been with who would tell me I was being unfair by not talking about my frustrations and being cold. I was unhappy because I have a lot of baggage. I was dissatisfied because I wasn't working towards satisfaction. I was afraid of an imaginary future, without accepting that I had control of that. I was afraid of loving, and afraid of fricking it up. So I fricked it up, because I knew I was going to anyway. To be fair, that time in my life was particularly difficult, and I had a lot of very reasonable concerns. What wasn't reasonable is how I let those fears and concerns control my inner monologue, and how much credence I gave them in general. I don't know what she's up to these days, but I hope she's well, and I hope she remembers the good things about me, if she thinks of me at all. Your story resonated with me because that sounds almost exactly like what my college sweetheart might tell me. If you are Jay, I still think highly of you and want the best for you. If not, I hope things worked out better for you than you could have imagined still. What's the worst way a so has broken up with you? For me, by far the worst was my first GF. We were at my parents' for Boxing Day lunch and she said that she was going over to see her mum. Her parents had recently split and this would be the first Christmas single. I said okay, and she left. I didn't hear anything from her for a few days and decided to call to see what was up. I found out that she had gone to her mum's, then to the pub and was not coming back anytime soon. I had already acquired her birthday presents. Her birthday was in January, and suggested that she come and get them as I couldn't return them. In March the following year she turned up and told me what had occurred. She had gotten drunk with her mum and slept with some random guy. To top this off, she had told all her family that I beat her to justify her escape route. They still to this day believe that I did it. She threw you under the bus and you didn't even deserve any of it. I'm sorry. My eldest's father went out to get nappies and never came back. That was it. She was 2 weeks old. My brother's girlfriend broke up with him via text on Christmas while he was throwing up from chemotherapy. It's one of the only times I've seen him cry. Told me she had been cheating on me and wasn't going to stop and I had to break it off with her so that everyone would see me as the bad guy. After I got over the shock I did, and she destroyed my social circles. A girl I was dating came to visit me at college and proceeded to clog my toilet right before a party I was throwing. She then led me outside to tell me she didn't want to see me anymore, then showed up at the party later with a guy she just started seeing. The toilet was still clogged and I was sad and bewildered. I was a bit younger than I am now, and I saw my then so on Christmas Eve, and we had the best night ever. We had just exchanged Christmas presents and wouldn't see each other again until after Christmas Day. Little did I know, this was the last I'd see of her. I didn't hear from her at all. The internet was the only way we could keep in touch, and she never came online, never emailed me either. Come the 6th of January, I see her change her relationship status to single, and that was it. Done. It took me a while to get over that one, and I don't think I fully 100% recovered. Not that I am still in love with her or anything, but I think it impacted my entire love life after it. Fast forward 5 or 6 years, we started talking to each other, we had both grown a lot, and we were thinking about getting back together. She seemed to want it more than me, and something was telling me not to do it, and I didn't. She's getting married soon, and I am happy for her. I forgive her for what she did, but I don't know if I'll ever forget it. I am in a 4-year strong relationship now, and couldn't be happier. When people just leave without saying anything, it definitely fricks with you. People need closure. I had a friend do this to me, just platonic friends. Made plans and that day came and went without hearing from her. No idea WTF the deal was. Still bothers me. I've always said if you do that to someone outside extreme situations, you're a piece of crap. Told me she was moving states to see a better doctor for a short period of time. She had medical issues so it was possible, and gonna stay with a friend for a couple of weeks. She took all her stuff that could fit in her friend's car, kissed me bye, and as soon as that car pulled out I never heard from her again. This was after agreeing we would do long distance until she came back. If you had to agree to do long distance for only 2 weeks, probably a good sign. When I was about 19, I had been dating this guy for a couple of months. One night, I decided to surprise him at his apartment. I parked and waited when another car pulled up a few spots away from me. My boyfriend and another girl stepped out of the car. He saw my car and walked over to me with her. He tried to introduce me to her, but I already knew her from one of my classes, because we lived in a small town. Then he said, "Yeah, it's just not working out between us." Then proceeded to go to his apartment with her. Being the other woman, how could you witness a guy treat his GF like that and think surely this is going to go well? Her friend texted me from her phone to break it off, along with some other petty insults. She decided to end the discussion with "you're skinny as frick. Go eat a cheeseburger." I could not stop laughing. I came home from work one day and all her stuff was gone, and there was a note on the TV that read, "I just left your sorry butt." At least she left the TV. I was with a girl for just over 5 years. When we met, she was in a bad place. The guy she was with before me used to beat her up and stuff. Really abusive. So it was tough in the beginning because she had major trust issues, self-esteem issues, depression, and she self-harmed. But I went and fell in love with her, helped her get over a lot of the mental anguish she was going through, took her to and paid for her therapist every other week. We lived together for 4 of those years. On our 5th anniversary, I proposed. I was madly in love with her, and I assumed she was with me. She said yes. Then, a few months after that, I got off work a bit early, picked up her favorite fish and chips for dinner and headed home. Long story short, I walked in her fricking some other dude in our bed, both butt naked. She's riding the guy like a fricking cowboy. They didn't even fricking hear me come into the apartment. I'll skip the details, but within 2 days of that happening, she was gone. All her stuff out of the apartment. Half of my stuff gone from the apartment, including my cash stash that was several thousand. She took my TV, a bunch of my kitchen stuff. She kept the ring. She took my fricking dog, man. Took the dang dog, and I haven't seen or spoken to her since. That was just about 3 years ago now. Dude, frick that bee. She's fricked up for taking your stuff, but you can get new stuff. But some bee took my dog. Heck no, I'm going after her. Also, I'm sorry you went through all of that after being with her for 5 years and being there for her. It sounds like you were a good boyfriend and I hope you find someone deserving of that. I was waiting by the phone for him to say he was on his way to pick me up for our Friday date night. Phone rang and he dumped me instead. She left me for a dude that had like 5 children with 3 different women and had abandoned them all. He told her she would be different, and she believed him. Methinks you dodged a bullet. I was about to drive home for spring break and I'll see her in 6 hours. Hit the normal "I can't wait to see you, love you" text. I was home for an hour and she came over and dumped me out of nowhere. Can't wait to see you so I can get this crap over with and dump you. So sweet. She got a scholarship to study in England while I stayed in the USA. Then came a letter saying that she'd fallen in love with a young professor there and was moving in with him. PFFT, I call that bulls. Probably chilling with some broke ass students, lol. Ex-fiance texted me at work to let me know she was cheating on me again. Oh, and this is over. Had been together for nearly 4 years. Should have left the first time she cheated, or maybe the second, third, or fourth time. I was not the smartest in my early 20s. Good riddance. B. I was not the smartest in my early 20s. Yeah, that's kinda how they work. She was supposed to come to my brother's wedding with me and then spend Thanksgiving with my family. A day before we were supposed to leave, I called to find out when I should pick her up, and she casually informed me that she was going to her friend's house for Thanksgiving, acting as though we had never even made plans. So that was that. You know LA traffic? How the city's slow? She made me drive across town on the 405 because she thought it would be more humane to break up with me face to face. Sorry, but I would have preferred a text, and the last thing LA needs is yet one more car smogging it up. Geez, I admire the sentiment, but in that case, she should have driven to you. Looking for her at a party. At some point I lost her and went hunting cause I wanted to leave. Walked into a spare bedroom and there she was kneeled down going to town on another guy. She looked at me and said, "Frick. Yeah, we aren't working anymore," and that was that. I left. Never spoke to her again. First serious girlfriend. Took my virginity. Called her one day after she hadn't been responding much. Guy answered telling me she never loved me as I heard her laughing in the background. At least she had the gall to get on the phone, still giggling, to tell me what he was saying was true. It ruined me. Holy crap dude, what a freaking B. Hope everything is better now. Cheated and didn't have the balls to tell me. Had to hear it from a friend of mine. Called him and asked to explain, but he was somewhere with that girl he cheated with. So I told him we were over. Next day he's at my door, crying his eyes out because he's sorry. Decided I wasn't going to give him another chance. He was with that girl just yesterday because that was more important. Fast forward a few months. We're still friends. Same group of friends. I get into a big fight with him. He told me he hopes I get cancer. My grandma died a year before that from cancer. I ended the conversation because my mom came in to tell me my grandpa just died. Told him to stop calling because of this. He still tried to call me the entire night. At that point I just blocked him. Never spoke to him again. Fun times. Broke up with me. Came back to me. Broke up with me again. Came back to me again, and now she is gone again. Apparently it's not me, it's her. I think that is some Hollywood bulls though. I think Hollywood might have stolen it from reality. Okay, I was planning a surprise trip to Orlando for myself and Victoria. She texts me 2 weeks before I come back home from school and dumps me. Said that since I went away to college I started drinking and I wasn't the same guy anymore. I would go to parties Friday nights and end up sending her cute little text saying she is an amazing GF. So yeah, frick me right. Left me shaken to say the least. Good thing this was the week of finals too. Find out 2 days later that she was already in a new relationship. I asked her if she dumped me for him and if she was cheating on me. She said no. A few months later I was sitting in my apartment, just after a party with my roommates. I get the idea that I should text her. I ask her if she dumped me for him and if she was cheating on me, and this time she said yes. So due to drunk logic I experienced this stupid pain twice with the same girl. Told me I was like a bowl of pierogies sitting on the table. You're full and don't want any, but you eat them anyway because they are there. Or pierogies are one of the best things in the world and you'd have to be crazy to not like or get sick of them. A few days after we got together his baby mama found out he was dating again and banned him from seeing his kid. Now I usually would be hesitant about dating a divorced guy with a baby, but I had known him since middle school and we actually dated a little in high school, so I felt okay about it. This caused a ton of tension between us, but I tried to understand. A month into our relationship and around Christmas time, he started to avoid me, would never text me back after 8 PM, claiming to have fallen asleep. Stopped inviting me to his apartment, asked for his key back, would constantly text his ex when he was with me. Just had all these excuses and I began to have a crap ton of anxiety for it. I would list all the crappy things that happened, but this story is getting too long already. A week before he dumped me, I got a message from a dude I had dated before my now ex. He wanted to meet up again but I declined because I was seeing someone and he understood, so we left it at. A week after New Year's I got a text from him while I was at work saying we needed to talk. By then I kind of figured what was going on. So I asked him, "We're breaking up, aren't we?" He didn't text me back until 4 in the morning and all he said was, I was livid. I called him out demanding him to tell me why when a few days before we had talked and he had promised me we were okay. He then said he would stop by at my place after work so we could fully talk about it. He never showed up and I never heard from him again. 2 weeks after the breakup, I decided to hit up the guy that messaged me. We ended up going to see The Force Awakens and after a month of him convincing me to date him again, I said yes. We've been happily together ever since and I'm the happiest I've ever been with someone. Few months into the RS and I felt it plateauing. He's not really into it, can't really be bothered to do anything beyond the realm of convenience, etc. I thought it was up to me to do something, you know, pull a Hail Mary with a huge gesture of commitment, yada yada. So I was planning this massively cringe pseudo speech thing about truly being in each other's lives and an elaborate college graduation celebration getaway thing. Oh god. While all this planning was happening, we got into an argument about something stupid, probably spiraled out of control partially due to my anxiety about the plans, and it turned out he never had any feelings for me ever since we met. This all happened via text. It didn't end there either. For some reason I was still convinced it was a matter of effort and got back together with him. It lasted a grand 12 hours before I was dumped again via text, told to hang on while he rethought the whole thing, and again via text a month later when he finally decided I wasn't worth it anyway. I think I need a few shots just dealing with the idea that this actually happened. Back in the very early days of social media, before even MySpace was a thing, I met my first boyfriend online. One day I noticed we were no longer listed as friends on that site. It turns out he decided to break up. That must rank even lower than dumped by SMS. I think I have to. The first one, his other girlfriend contacted me because she wanted to make sure I knew of her presence. I technically broke up with him, but it was still a crappy way to find out that he was cheating on me. I wish he had just broken up with me and then got into a relationship with that girl, but he was pretty upset that I cut him out of my life and spent years trying to win me back. Second one, it was the days of MySpace. He sent me a MySpace message Sunday night with school the next day. Luckily I had gotten on and seen it. I didn't check it constantly. Someone asked him what he would have done had I not seen it yet, and he said he would have just kept pretending we were in a relationship until I got back on MySpace. Reverse. I wanted to be the one to do the breaking up. Waited outside her dorm house and tried calling her to meet me outside. She never answered my 50+ calls. So I said frick this, left and never looked back. Turns out she was taking a dump and had left her phone in bed. If you're calling someone 50 times in the span of a crap taking, you should do some real thinking before dating again. After I told her I didn't want to date her anymore, she threw a few things at me. She had been trying to get me to move out of my nice living situation because she just wanted me to live alone. Then, she called all my friends and family she had numbers for and told them I had STDs. I don't. But she was trying to destroy my life. She also committed fraud identity theft when she transferred our joint cell phone into solely her name and replaced it with a dummy phone on my plan. So, now, I had 2 phones to pay for, one of which was fake. She was not successful. First real girlfriend in senior year of high school. Her parents thought she was Miss Innocent but was a freak in the sheets. So like every high school relationship we had a fight. So I went for a boys' night and she went for a girls' night. Except her girls' night was with a guy whom I didn't trust but was just a friend. I wake up to her calling me, thinking she wants to talk. It's her getting plowed by that one friend. So I did what I thought was the right thing and hit record on my Motorola Razr. I was crushed, but not as crushed as her parents were that morning when I played it for them. Oh well. In Navy boot camp, during a telephone call where she tells you she fell for her best friend's ex, who we double dated with before. Long distance girlfriend in college. came home from school and rushed to get her a Christmas present since the small town in went to school and didn't have any store but Walmart. Christmas comes and she didn't have time to get me anything. She was so happy to take my gift. Okay, no problem. New Year's comes and she says she's not feeling well and is going to stay home and go to bed early. I stayed in because everyone already bought tickets to night parties. At around midnight I get a mass text from her saying Happy New Year to all her friends and how blessed she is. Her friend that I was kinda friends with asked me why I wasn't at the party with her. Took the hint and after a month of not communicating with her she asked if we are broken up. We lived together for a year and a half. I had to move back to my country because my visa expired. She got married 2 months after I went home. IDK if this is so bad, but I feel horrible to this day. I was the breakup-er. We, 40 years old at the time, had a standing unit date every Tuesday. I would meet him at his house, 1/2 hour away from where I lived, and on his lunch break, he'd come home, in more ways than one. So, a couple of weeks went by that didn't happen. We both had kids and a busy schedule. During that time, I realized a guy I knew, IDK, I just liked him a whole heck of a lot better. I had an epiphany that even though I wasn't involved with the other guy, it was a sure sign that liking someone better than my BF was possible. I had to break up with my BF. I had to do it in person, out of respect. So once a Tuesday worked out for us, I planned to go to his house. I was there when he walked in. He hugged me. He was already hard. I put my hands around his face. I told him I was sorry. I just said, I have to end our relationship. It's just not fitting me and who I am and where I'm at in life right now. There's nothing you can do. Goodbye. And I drove the 1/2 hour home knowing I made the right decision. But I just can't imagine going home for a lunch break nooner and getting dumped instead. I still feel bad for the guy. I mean, at least it was in person and you were honest about it. Leaving out the details about the other guy was probably smart. If I was in his shoes, it would have killed me even more. She made me breakfast after I crashed at her pad. She told me she wanted to see other people. I was fine with that. You can't make someone love you if it's over. You shut up and move on. I was thinking to myself, give me a 2-week notice, at least I kind of wasted a little less than a year with you. Then I realized how crappy that would be if you were told by dating HR you're going to be single. Sat there dumbfounded thinking about would a 2-week notice be feasible or ethical, would there be a temp agency for that thing? Then I realized that is what a bar is for, while tuning in and out about how she wants to be single. I am sitting here trying to be as stoic as possible, but I was devastated. I was with her for 11 months, things are going great, then out of nowhere you get blindsided and you're just sitting there with a crap-eating grin putting on your best I am not sad face, but you can see that squint of sadness. I finished my bacon and eggs, drove to the liquor store, bought a 3 tall can pack of T-Cats and some smokes, had a joint, watched Commando, and was going to start Goodfellas. Pretty much anything I can do to get over her. I run out of my 3-pack. I take a walk to the store. I see her at the liquor store with a new guy. Turns out she was seeing a person we mutually knew. He wasn't friends, but I will say hi if we're at a party, plus he knew some friends from college. Since I was studying computer science at the time, I walked home with my Modelo in hand thinking, crap, she's seeing someone who lives relatively close to me and he knows some close friends. It wasn't the breakup that hurt, it was more of her seeing a person who lives a couple blocks down and knew some of my friends, so running into her wasn't hard. I could be at a party or some local venue I frequent and guess who's there? The running into them at parties suck. The fact she wasted 5 minutes of my life telling me she wants to be single and I see her at the liquor store with a new guy was BS. All I wanted was a beer. I went with her on a sorority date party that happened to be on a boat. She waited until what she thought was the end of the trip and took me outside and ended things. Except that she was wrong and we had another couple hours on the boat. So I had to put on a good face and try my best not to be awkward while everyone else was with their dates. The worst part was that she had known before we ever got on the boat that she was going to end it. This wasn't the most serious relationship, but still, don't break up with someone on a boat. My young and naive self decided to propose to my girlfriend and best friend of 3 years, whom we recently found out was pregnant. A measly 2 days after I give her this beautiful ring, she miscarried, and the day after that, she gives my ring back and never talked to me again. After that, I was in one of the darkest places I'd ever been in my life, unsure of when things would get better, or if they ever would. That was 7 years ago, and I'm well past that, but I've never forgotten. We actually bumped into each other at Walmart the other day, and it was interesting to say the least. Her eyes told me she had about 1,000 things to say to me. I can only imagine what mine said, but we passed each other without a word. I kinda wished I'd said something tbh. My girlfriend in high school had to move to Hawaii because her dad got a teaching job there. I saved up money my entire senior year by washing dishes so I could move to Hawaii to be with her. 3 months after I arrived, she broke up with me on my birthday at a Starbucks. Aloha. Got broken up with on my 21st birthday. I had cancelled plans of going out of town with my parents to a casino town, not Las Vegas. I think it was Alabama, so that we could spend my birthday together getting drunk and fricking for a week straight while my parents were gone. Instead, I spent the week lonely and crying. We were together for 9 months and we were both young and immature. We mutually agreed it wouldn't work out, but had a falling out afterwards. 4 years passed, then I saw this comment from a Reddit username that looked vaguely familiar. He uses the same username for every website and other comments confirmed it was him, with a similar backstory to our relationship, except he lied about everything. Now I downvote everything he posts comments for petty revenge that won't hurt anyone except his karma. My sister is coming over after work to grab some of her things. Will you leave your key under the mat for her? Me. Sure. Changes locks and sends me an offline message on AIM about how it was over. etc. Things were going great. Then one day she just refused a kiss and said we need to talk. Did the deed, and when I asked why she said, I love you, but I'm not in love with you. Which was crazy because 2 days earlier we'd had a long talk about our future and she spent most of it talking about how happy she was to be with me and how much she was in love with me, and she wanted to have babies with me and all that. It never sat right with me. It just seemed like a lie. Come to find out 2 years later that she was madly in love with me the whole time, but I had been stagnating with joblessness and she couldn't see a bright future with me. We've both moved on since, but it fricked me up for 2 years. I live in France. She was in the US at the time, said come visit me, we'll have some fun, and dumped me when I arrived. 18 hours of flight, $1,000 and an amazing I'm sorry, I just don't feel it anymore. Not the so, but I had an ex who pulled a secret move in. She also believed that a breakup had to be mutual, not just me saying get the frick out of my apartment, we're done. So, I had her get dressed up for a special date. Took her out to a few activities I knew she loved, took her to the nicest restaurant in the area, and then took her to her parents' house. She thought I was proposing to her. She walked inside and saw all of her stuff in there and realized what was really going on as I told her I never want to frickin' see her again. I'd had my buddies gather her stuff up while we were out and do the move for me. Those are some good friends. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.